The grand Windestal Royal Academy of Magic stood majestically, a place of yearning for a new life, a new beginning. Within its hallowed halls, a young student, eager to embrace the best of his new life, attempted to cast a fireball spell. However, his efforts proved disastrous, as the spell backfired, striking him with a painful force. He lay sprawled on the ground, ridiculed by his peers who called him Brat-sama and the Black Pig Prince, lamenting his inability to properly cast even a simple fireball. Suddenly disoriented, he found himself questioning his surroundings, feeling unwell, as if his very being was splitting. Simultaneously, a different version of him, a young man in a modern suit, appeared equally bewildered, recognizing something familiar yet alien. The modern man pondered the impossible, wondering if the other young man was truly him, while the fantasy prince grappled with the unsettling possibility that these were memories from another life, perhaps his own. The internal struggle intensified, manifesting as a silent scream of anguish and realization. In his modern reality, the young man bowed deeply, apologizing to an older superior who chastised him for a critical blunder, demanding to know how he could hand over important documents in such a short time. He internally lamented his situation, acknowledging his inability to stomach such an attitude and the prospect of working overnight. The superior's hand slammed down on the desk, demanding the work be redone before the day was over, a harsh command that seemed to echo in the fantasy prince's mind, leaving him visibly distressed. The modern protagonist, weary from his day, held a cup and reflected on his habit of speaking to himself, acknowledging his exhaustion. Meanwhile, in a different reality, Brat, the fantasy protagonist, looked startled as someone asked if he had spoken aloud, denying it quickly. Back in his own world, the modern protagonist arrived home, noting the late hour, a familiar routine after working every day in the same fashion. He recalled a conversation with his balding boss, who seemed to understand his plight. Later, he settled down to play Final Quest, his sole source of enjoyment, surrounded by empty energy drink cans, losing track of how many weeks had passed in his dedicated gaming. As the game displayed a message thanking the hero for bringing peace, he found himself wishing he could go to that world, a world he knew intimately from countless playthroughs. Suddenly, Brat was overwhelmed by a surge of memories, his mind racing as he desperately tried to recall everything from his game playthroughs, questioning how old his present self truly was. The memories solidified, revealing his identity as Brat von Pishtel, the first prince of the Pishtel Kingdom, a treacherous young king who had conspired with the Demon King for his revival. He recalled the game's plot, knowing that the hero and his own younger brother would ultimately defeat him. He now understood everything that would happen, thanks to his extensive experience playing the game. The full horror of his situation dawned upon him. He had reincarnated as the Black Pig Prince, Brat von Pishtel, a villainous character whose death was a predetermined part of the story. He stared at his own reflection, horrified by his new, corpulent form. His distress did not go unnoticed. Logie, his personal maid, rushed into the room, her bunny ears twitching with concern, asking if he was all right or if he had been hurt, offering to call a healer immediately. He quickly tried to reassure her, stating he was already fine and that she didn't need to do anything unnecessary, but his abruptness only seemed to shock her further. Logie, still reeling from Brat's sudden outburst, apologizes profusely, bowing deeply and admitting her actions were impertinent. She promises to be more careful in the future and pleads for leniency. Her body trembled visibly as she spoke, a detail Brat noticed from his bed. He watched her, a flicker of concern in his eyes. Brat, observing her distress, began to question his own behavior. He wondered if he had been the one punishing her, realizing that such an act would be unreasonable and that she was likely just trying to meet his needs. He looked at Logie, who still appeared distressed, and a memory surfaced. He was the one who had repeatedly punished her in the past. Brat then mused that her actions were not truly worthy of punishment, as she had only been concerned for his well-being. He expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that he had put her through much. Logie, overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, could only manage a choked sound, her head bowed low. Brat, seeing her distress, quickly asked why she was crying, wondering if he had said something strange to upset her further. Logie, however, continued to sob uncontrollably. She tearfully apologized, explaining that she had always been scolded and had never been able to fulfill his expectations, making his words of gratitude all the more overwhelming. Brat, kneeling beside her, reassured her, stating that it was he who should be thanking her, as his previous attitude had caused her unnecessary anxiety. Brat, with a determined expression, declared that from now on he would become a man and a lord his servants would not be ashamed of, asking if she would continue to serve him. Logie, overjoyed, tearfully affirmed her unwavering loyalty, promising to serve him with her whole heart. He lay in bed, reflecting on his new reality. More than anything, he wished to avoid death, a fate he knew awaited him in this world. He recalled the game's plot. Brat would be defeated by the Demon King and his 4 heavenly generals, and then the king would assassinate him. It seemed too simple to merely avoid death by being careful. From now on, he would completely shed his darkness. Looking at his reflection, he grimaced, finding his current appearance quite ugly. He resolved to change his looks, perhaps through dieting. With newfound determination, he began to exercise vigorously, punching the air and declaring his intent to diet and train his body to beat the Demon King and the 4 demon generals to a pulp. He quickly grew winded but remained resolute. Still catching his breath, he called out for Logie, who immediately appeared, confirming her presence. He then asked her to remove all the sweets from his room. Logie, holding a tray laden with pastries, confirmed they were delicious but inquired if they did not suit his palate. He explained that he had decided it would be a good idea to lose some weight. He instructed her to make arrangements to spread the sweets throughout the slums and the orphanages. He also suggested that if she had many brothers and sisters, they would be delighted if she brought some home. Logi, overwhelmed by his generosity, exclaimed his name in awe, realizing these were expensive goods. He entrusted the task to her, and she eagerly accepted. The next day, he found himself at the back of the royal palace, the first military training ground, a location he remembered from his past life. As he walked, he spotted a figure sleeping under a large tree. He wondered if he had made a mistake, as the training ground was supposed to be further ahead. He recognized the sleeping man as Guras, the demon slayer, and tried to get his attention, but the hero remained oblivious, seemingly ignoring him. He approached the now-awake hero, introducing himself as the first prince and asking what he was doing there. Guras, the seventh hero demon slayer, Guras Streisman, offered him croquettes, mentioning he had to return home with them. Brat, however, had a different request. He asked Guras to make him his disciple. Guras gave an immediate and blunt refusal, stating it was impossible. He explained that training Brat would be too bothersome and would cut into his sleep, making him the knight's opponent. He scoffed at Brat's sudden desire to begin training, especially so late in the day, reminding him that he had never visited the military training grounds before and had always loathed such activities. He even mocked Brat's former pig-like physique, suggesting he probably never exercised. Brat, however, dismissed the taunts, declaring his intent to grow up and correct himself, despite having previously slacked off. He then explained the critical nature of the current training event, stating it was designed to avert an impending calamity. He revealed that the key figure hidden within the military training grounds was himself, the hero Guras. He questioned Brat's ability to grasp the situation's seriousness, implying Brat was too weak to handle it and would likely break under pressure. Despite Guras' dismissive attitude, Brat prostrated himself on the ground, desperately begging him to accept him as his disciple. Guras, observing Brat's earnest plea, seemed genuinely surprised, questioning if he was dreaming. After a moment, Guras declared he would test Brat, noting that Brat had shed his pride in a different, unexpected way. Brat internally recognized this as a pivotal moment, recalling that in the game, the protagonist would proceed to the training grounds only after Guras' suggestion, making the timing of his own request critical. Guras immediately launched a powerful kick, striking Brat squarely in the face. Brat cried out in pain, having anticipated the attack but proving unable to avoid the devastating blow. Brat lay on the ground, clutching his head in agony and lamenting his foolishness. Guras stood over him, silent and unreadable, offering no comfort. From an unseen position, Guras' voice echoed, mocking Brat and telling him to know his place, his words dripping with disdain. Guras then extended a hand towards the fallen Brat, who looked up at him, questioning if his situation was truly hopeless. To Brat's utter shock, Guras then smiled brightly and declared that he had passed the test. Guras confirmed that Brat could indeed ask to be trained by him, and Brat, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked his new master, eagerly looking forward to their training. He was filled with an unusual degree of excitement, his fist raised in triumph. Guras, observing him, reflected on their earlier encounter. Brat's defense had been entirely useless, yet he had reacted as if he knew precisely where the attack would originate. This was a surprise, Guras mused, sensing that things were about to become very interesting. As Brat beamed with unbridled joy, a subtle thought crossed Guras' mind, a quiet acknowledgement of the young man, Brat. His gaze sharpened. Guras challenged the boy internally, wondering if he was truly genuine or merely a sham, demanding that Brat prove himself. Without hesitation, Brat roared his commitment, promising to do his absolute best. In this manner, despite a minor misunderstanding, Brat, now officially Guras' disciple, embarked upon the first step of a new life. A new day dawned as Logi stretched languidly in her bed, a wide yawn escaping her lips. Her maid colleague, Lena, observed her from the bunk above, asking if she was all right, noting her terrible face. Logi, still yawning, explained that she was merely a bit sleep-deprived. Meanwhile, Lena began to dress, donning her dark maid uniform. She mused aloud that their master seemed unusually motivated recently, pushing himself for a reason she couldn't quite grasp. Logi, listening from her bed, wondered what kind of master would exert himself so much. Lena then turned to Logi, her expression serious, and asked if their master wasn't pushing her too hard as well, causing Logi to gasp in surprise. Logi pouted, her cheeks puffed out, as Lena continued to tease her, remarking that her cute face would be wasted with dark circles under her eyes. Lena advised her to rest properly while her master's kindness lasted, prompting Logi to insist that her master had always been kind and that Lena shouldn't treat her like a child. As Lena finished dressing, she playfully told Logi not to get mad, reiterating that their master, Brat-sama, had always been kind, even now. Logi, still looking displeased, conceded with a humph, stating she understood and would be careful. Lena, however, warned her not to force herself, adding that it would be sad if she were to collapse. Lena then turned her gaze towards the window, her expression shifting as she noticed something outside. Logi, following her gaze, saw Guras-sama outside, training intensely. He shouted for one more time, pushing himself relentlessly, a sight that made Logi think of him as the one she was rooting for, giving his all today too. Guras, the subject of their observation, lay utterly exhausted on the ground, his eyes crossed. Lena commented that she had thought he would quit after just a day, but somehow, a week had already passed, acknowledging his impressive persistence. She turned to Logi, her expression questioning, and asked if Logi could truly support someone like Brat-sama. Logi, looking distressed, admitted that Brat-sama had an awful look on his face. Meanwhile, Logi found herself blushing, internally wondering why her cheeks were red and dismissing it as a delicious illness, while thinking of someone as so cool. Elsewhere, Lena observed a figure approaching the building, recognizing him as Albert-sama, accompanied by another maid. Albert, the newly arrived figure, walked with an air of calm confidence, flanked by Lena and the other maid. He was none other than Pishtel Kingdom's second prince, Albert von Pishtel. From a window, Logi and Lena continued to observe his movements. Logi murmured, "Even so," and Lena wondered aloud what his purpose was for visiting. Logi then confirmed that he was heading toward Brat-sama. Elsewhere, Gyuras sat on the floor, looking utterly exhausted and holding his head, while a dark-haired man stood over him, observing. The dark-haired man spoke, his voice carrying a hint of surprise as he recognized Gyuras, saying, My, if it is none other than..." Gyuras, startled, exclaimed, "Albert, what is he doing here?" Albert, standing tall and composed, greeted Gyuras, acknowledging his early morning training. Gyuras internally felt lucky to meet him. From a distance, Lena and the other maid whispered, noting that Albert was a troublesome guy, and that people generally murmured about him. Gyuras' expression hardened with determination as he realized this situation presented an opportunity. He believed that if he could repair their sibling relationship now, he might be able to prevent another scenario that would trigger a death ending, recalling that in the game, he had been killed by Albert. Gyuras looked down, seemingly dejected, as Albert confronted him. Albert remarked on Gyuras' presence despite his previous refusal to train him, then questioned, "Gyuras-san, aren't you too heartless, though?" The dark-haired man observed their exchange, wondering what troubled Albert. He continued to press Gyuras, remarking that Gyuras seemed more interested in training his older brother, Brat, than him. Albert found this preference boring, especially since he had also defeated Brat in the past. Gyuras, kneeling before him, appeared shocked by the accusation. Gyuras, still reeling from Albert's words, laughed nervously, scratching his head. He admitted to himself that he might have overestimated his own swordsmanship, believing it to be superior to his older brother's. Moments later, Gyuras gritted his teeth in frustration, recalling Albert's earlier taunts. Just then, Albert appeared, greeting Gyuras casually as if he had just noticed him. Albert then provocatively asked if Gyuras truly desired to be trained by him, suggesting they engage in some morning training together. Albert chuckled, dismissing Gyuras' attempts at humor as incompetent. He then clarified his offer, stating that their training session would actually take the form of a match. Brat, observing the exchange, internally labeled Albert a duel fanatic, but admitted he was eager to witness the contest. Gyuras, meanwhile, reacted with wide-eyed surprise at the mention of a match. Gyuras turned to Brat, seeking clarification. Brat, with a knowing smile, offered a powerful incentive. If Gyuras won the match, he would teach him a valuable new skill. The realization of this potential reward dawned on Gyuras, sparking a new determination. Gyuras, now understanding the stakes, accepted the challenge, acknowledging the recklessness of the situation but deeming it necessary for the sake of acquiring new skills. Albert watched him with a subtle smile, while Brat, pleased with the development, skipped away happily. With the stage set, Brat, Gyuras, and Albert gathered in what appeared to be an outdoor training arena. Brat formally proposed they begin the match, setting a clear time limit. The duel would continue until the morning duties bell rang. As the match was about to commence, Logi and Lena watched from the sidelines, with Logi offering words of encouragement to Brat. Brat then instructed both Gyuras and Albert to step back, urging them to fight with the intention to kill, but assuring them he would intervene instantly if the match became too dangerous. Albert, ever confident, smiled and declared that a time limit was unnecessary, as he intended to finish the fight in an instant. Gyuras, now on one knee, gripped his sword tightly, his gaze sharp and focused, ready to engage. Albert stood opposite him, his expression calm and observant. With a surge of resolve, Gyuras declared that there was no room for weakness. He then let out a fierce cry, lunging forward with his sword, challenging Albert to unleash his full power. He launched his attack with surprising speed, but Albert parried effortlessly. Gyuras noted the incredible quickness and the sheer weight behind Albert's sword strikes, realizing his opponent's power far exceeded his own level 15, likely nearing level 30. Albert then shifted to the offensive, taunting Gyuras for merely defending. Gyuras struggled to parry the relentless assault, realizing he was barely able to defend himself, let alone counterattack, against what he perceived as a true genius. As the duel continued, Gyuras found himself increasingly overwhelmed. From the sidelines, Lena expressed her concern, questioning if this could even be called a fair match, while Brat remained confident, asserting that victory was certain for Albert. Suddenly, a new figure appeared beside Brat, startling Logi and Lena. The newcomer, a dark-haired man, smiled knowingly as Brat remarked that the true fight was just beginning, and they still didn't know how it would turn out. The dark-haired man then added that it would be strange for a match with such an overwhelming difference in strength, like that between an adult and a child, not to be settled in an instant. Meanwhile, the intense clash between Gyuras and Albert continued, their blades striking sparks in the grand hall, as the dark-haired man wondered what was truly unfolding before them. Gyuras cried out in frustration, his attacks proving utterly ineffective despite his full effort and precise aiming. Albert, however, remained calm, observing that Gyuras' attack patterns were identical to those from a final quest. He knew easily anticipating a sweeping sideways motion followed by a downward vertical swing, then a slash from the shoulder, and a diagonal slashing attack from the left shoulder. Albert then prepared a powerful overhead downward swing, urging Guras to give up his stubborn resistance. Guras, however, saw a desperate opportunity in the attack, realizing he had to seize this chance, now or never. With a desperate cry, Guras attempted to evade the blow and counterattack, but Albert, anticipating his move, easily blocked it, remarking that the timing was perfect for his own reach. Guras realized his agility stats were insufficient, leaving him vulnerable. Albert, with a triumphant laugh, delivered the final strike, declaring the end of the match and revealing their familial bond by calling Guras his elder brother. He held Guras firmly, declaring the match concluded. Guras, caught off guard, could only utter a surprised gasp. Meanwhile, Brat observed the scene, a subtle sigh of relief escaping him as he noted the outcome. Guras, however, quickly regained his composure and protested the decision, arguing that his final attack, had it connected, would have secured his victory. He refused to accept a draw. As Albert began to walk away with Brat, Guras called out to him, demanding he wait. Brat, visibly annoyed by the interruption, urged Albert to continue moving. Albert paused, turning his head slightly to express his frustration. He admitted to being shocked and caught off guard by his elder brother's cunning tactics, but vehemently denied having truly lost the match. He then turned fully to Guras, inquiring about his persistence. Guras, still agitated, warned Albert not to become arrogant about the outcome. Guras, looking somewhat flustered, then awkwardly admitted that their relationship had not been particularly harmonious until now. Albert listened intently, acknowledging that despite Guras being his younger brother, his abilities were indeed remarkable. He then proposed that if Guras was willing, they could be training partners on another occasion. With that, Albert, Brat, and the accompanying maids departed. The maids, including Logie and Lena, exchanged annoyed glances and muttered their displeasure with Albert's demeanor. Suddenly, Brat reappeared beside Guras, startling him. Brat offered his congratulations, praising Guras' performance as unbelievable. He revealed that he had understood the significant difference in their strengths from the very beginning, and that Guras had strategically aimed for a draw. Brat then offered to teach Guras the skills he so clearly desired, acknowledging the impressive display Guras had put forth despite the draw. Guras, utterly shocked and delighted, could only stammer in response. He exclaimed with overwhelming joy, raising his arms in profound gratitude and thanking Brat profusely for his offer. Logie watched with a slight smile, while Lena, her bunny ears twitching, blushed deeply and openly declared her admiration for Brat, finding him incredibly cool. Another maid, observing Lena's intense reaction, looked on with a worried, questioning expression. Brat, for his part, had just taken another significant stride toward averting the dreaded death ending. A week had passed since the confrontation involving Brat and Albert, a memory Lena still found dreamlike. She reflected on the impossibility of forcing a draw with Albert, even now. Meanwhile, Logie, ever energetic, greeted Brat with a cheerful good morning. Inside the mansion, Brat, now looking completely refreshed and refined, prepared to depart. He informed a maid that he would be heading to the mountains for a while. The maid, along with Lena, observed his transformation, marveling at how much he had changed in just 2 weeks since being accepted as Guras' disciple. As he walked away, a maid called out to him, wishing him well and asking him to return early for a delicious dinner, emphasizing his dignified and valiant appearance. Lena, still observing, found herself utterly amazed by the transformation, noting that it seemed to have changed the perceptions of other people as well. Logie, however, seemed less pleased, complaining to Lena about the increasing difficulty for her rivals due to Brat's newfound popularity. Lena agreed, acknowledging the challenge. Logie then rushed off, seemingly in pursuit of Brat. Elsewhere, Brat arrived at the dragon house, where a magnificent white dragon lay resting. He greeted the creature, asking if it had been well. He joyfully embraced the creature, calling him Gilgard, and expressed his delight that the dragon remembered him despite his changed appearance. Looking into the dragon's eyes, he then revealed that there was a specific place he wished to be taken to today. Before they could depart, Logie suddenly rushed into the dragon house, urgently calling for Brat to wait. Logie, still reeling from Brat's sudden decision, confronted him, demanding to know why he would leave a farewell letter and suddenly declare his intention to seclude himself in the mountains. Brat, however, merely apologized, stating he had no plans to return home for a while and insisted they should discuss such important matters properly. Logie, visibly distressed, pleaded with him not to go. He then gently patted her head, an action that made her internally think of him as cute. Logie, flustered by the unexpected gesture, questioned why he was patting her head, before reacting with an exaggerated gasp of surprise and embarrassment. Still flustered, she firmly told him he absolutely could not leave right now, insisting he wait until at least tomorrow afternoon. He questioned her reasoning, while she secretly reveled in the affectionate praise, finding it hard to resist. Logie, her expression shifting to one of urgency, reminded him with a gasp, "Why? Did you forget? You told me absolutely not to forget that Marie-sama is visiting the royal palace today." Standing before Brat near the dragon's stable, she reiterated her accusation, calling him mean for forgetting such an important detail. Just then, a new figure appeared, Brat's fiancée, Marie Elfortas. She explained that she had come to see what he was doing, having noted his recent temporary absence from school and his apparent forgetfulness regarding their appointment. This was Brat's fiancée, the Duke's daughter, Marie Elfortas. Brat, surprised, simply uttered Marie's name. Logi, equally startled, exclaimed that Marie-sama had already arrived. He offered her a gentle smile, but she averted her gaze, her expression unreadable. Marie then suggested they speak inside, noting the chill in the air. Brat readily agreed, with Logi standing quietly behind him. She sat in the opulent room, her expression thoughtful, as if steeling herself for a difficult conversation. Moments later, Brat, visibly stunned, questioned her, asking if she truly intended to break off their engagement. She, however, remained composed, taking a calm sip from her teacup. He stood before her, his confusion evident as he pressed for an explanation, wondering why she was raising such a serious matter so abruptly. She calmly suggested that he search his own memories for the reasons behind her decision, implying the answers were already within him. He looked troubled by her words. A wave of realization washed over him as he recalled his past self, a figure consumed by various vices, sloth, gluttony, lust, and greed. He understood then that he had indeed overdone it. She continued, stating that the only remaining step was his acknowledgement of the broken engagement. He responded that he had already informed His Highness, who had declared he had no right to interfere. He hesitated, questioning if the decision was too rushed. She, in turn, looked at him directly, asking if he was truly content with ending their engagement. Flustered, he admitted he had forgotten their appointment, which only seemed to confirm her earlier suspicion that he looked down on her. She remarked that she hadn't expected him to try and stop her. He quickly insisted that he was genuinely trying to change. He looked desperate, but she continued, pointing out that his appearance had changed so drastically since their last meeting that he was now unrecognizable. She explained that she could no longer easily place her faith in him, believing that the people around him and the general populace felt the same way. She revealed that in the past, she had repeatedly allowed her hopes to rise, only to be met with disappointment in the end. She listened as he explained that unless he achieved a great feat, he would likely not be accepted or recognized by others. He offered the championship of this sword dance festival as an example, a battle tournament held annually at the academy to determine its strongest, but she found such an accomplishment to be out of reach for him. Despite her doubts, he then asked, with a hopeful expression, if she would reconsider the annulment if he were to become the champion. She was taken aback by his earnestness, finding the idea of him achieving such a feat to be impossible. He swore in the name of the sword god Balzac, protector of their country, that he would, without fail, attain the Sword Dance Festival's championship. On that occurrence, he requested that she desist from the idea of breaking off their engagement. She looked at him, flustered and uncertain. She reiterated that such a feat was absolutely unlikely, but he simply bid her farewell, stating he must now depart to grow stronger. As he left, she reflected on the situation, realizing that some things were better left unknown, and that she had not revealed the true reason behind her desire to break the engagement. Moments later, now wearing glasses, he looked out with a wide smile, marveling at the superb view before him. He announced his arrival at the mountain range of the heavens, Sky Mountain, and thanked his dragon, Gilgard, instructing it to land nearby. As Gilgard landed, he again thanked the dragon and told it to wait there. He then resolved to do his very best in what would be his first dungeon, Sky Mountain. With a determined grin, he declared his readiness and charged forward. He entered the first floor of Sky Mountain, observing that it looked just like a dungeon from a Final Quest game. As he walked through the cavernous passage, he considered that he had approximately 1 month until the Sword Dance Festival, and with his current level around 20, he needed to get stronger efficiently. His thoughts were interrupted as 3 lizard-like monsters emerged from the shadows, growling aggressively. He stood before the small lizard monsters, dismissing them with a confident smirk. "So, you appeared right away, huh? Humph. Hold your horses, the likes of you are not my opponents." With a wide, almost playful grin, he declared he would let them slip away, watching as the small creatures scurried off. He chuckled, explaining his rationale. These minor foes were of no use to him. His goal was the most efficient leveling possible, and they offered little experience. His expression then shifted, a subtle bead of sweat forming on his brow as he sensed something significant. Here it is. He finally located his target, a massive snake-like monster, its body blending with the cavern walls. He noted it had taken him half a day to find it, confirming it was indeed a rare monster. The creature let out a low hiss, its scales shimmering faintly. Brat realized the orichalcum snake, a creature appearing around level 25, was easily frightened. He knew he would have only one chance to strike. As the snake coiled, preparing to attack, he braced himself, shouting, "Now!" With a swift, decisive motion, he unleashed a powerful penetration slash, his blade cutting through the snake's tough hide with ease. A wave of satisfaction washed over him as he felt his level increase. The defeated orichalcum snake dropped a valuable item, orichalcum, a material known for its high resistance, making it invaluable for defense-ignoring skills like his penetration slash from Giras. He grinned, ready to continue his efficient leveling. "All right, brace yourselves and go forward." As he pressed deeper into the dungeon, he suddenly encountered a group of adventurers. Among them, he recognized Mina, one of the 7 heroes who would make a final appearance in the quest. He called out her name, startling her. She looked at him, confused, asking, "Why do you know my name, Naya?" He realized he had unintentionally called out to her, a slip of the tongue. She looked at him with surprise, asking if he was a rich young master from somewhere, noting his noble appearance. Her identity as Mina Libert, the Kate Sith dual swordsman, was clear. He quickly apologized for startling her, introducing himself as Brat. He then explained that he had remembered her from a previous visit to her Kate Sith settlement with his father, admitting he found her quite cute. Her face flushed with embarrassment at his compliment, but she conceded that his explanation for knowing her name made sense. Internally, he wondered if his feigned innocence had been convincing. She then shifted the topic, inquiring why he, a Kate Sith, was roaming such a labyrinth. She clarified her presence, stating she was there to conduct a preliminary investigation, or more accurately, an exploration. With her party members beside her, she elaborated on their mission. In a month's time, they planned to form a large-scale subjugation party to conquer the Sky Mountain dungeon and subjugate the Cyclops. He acknowledged her objective, understanding their aim was the Cyclops residing in the deepest part of the dungeon. He then expressed concern, revealing that the Kate Sith village was under the Cyclops' control, demanding sacrifices, and warned that even with a large party, challenging such a mighty foe would likely end in defeat. Surprised by his detailed knowledge, she questioned him, but he quickly explained he had learned about it during his previous visit to her village. Visibly frustrated, she retorted that they could not simply continue to endure the Cyclops' demands, questioning what an outsider could possibly know of their plight. He internally conceded that her situation was indeed complex. She then firmly stated that the settlement had already made its decision and, observing his apparent lack of strength, advised him to take care and avoid being found by the Cyclops' subordinates. As she turned to leave, he pondered internally what his next course of action should be. She simply bid him farewell. He watched Mina and her party depart, his mind racing. He knew that the Cyclops' eventual defeat by a hero party, which would include both Albert and Mina, was an event destined to occur 4 years in the future. He then considered Mina's current capabilities, estimating her level to be around 20, which he knew was slightly below the Cyclops' formidable level 25. He pondered the situation, realizing that Mina and her companions were likely to face a grim outcome if they proceeded with their current plan. He worried about the Cyclops subjugation, an event he knew was destined to occur years later, and considered whether it was better not to meddle too much with the established future. For now, he decided it was best to return. As the two went their separate ways, Mina watched him depart, musing to herself about what an odd individual he was. A little while ago, the Kate Sith village found itself under a brutal assault, its structures burning as villagers cried out in terror. A monstrous figure, a self-proclaimed member of the Demon King armies for demon generals known as Cyclops, declared his dominion over the settlement, demanding sacrifices to cease his attack. An elder of the village, his face etched with concern, questioned Cyclops' true intentions, recalling that the Demon King was supposedly sealed many years ago by Girasuma and the 7 heroes. Cyclops, however, scoffed at the elder's words, revealing his true objective, to end the Demon King's slumber and revive him. He explained that this endeavor required massive quantities of magic, and since the Kate Sith were embodiments of such power, their complacency had made them ideal sacrifices for his goal. Mina and her stepmother listened in horror. As Cyclops continued his pronouncements, a young Kate Sith warrior named Libert stepped forward, a dagger clutched in his hand, challenging the monster's assertion that they were complacent and weak. His mother and stepmother cried out in alarm, urging him to wait. Cyclops found Libert's bravery amusing, remarking on the interesting prospect of a sacrifice candidate presenting himself. The elder and other villagers, however, pleaded with Libert, believing it absurd for someone like him to go against the powerful general. Despite their pleas, Libert, with a determined gaze, invited Cyclops to face him. Libert charged forward, convinced that fighting now was their only chance to avoid their ultimate end. But as he closed the distance, Cyclops suddenly vanished from his sight, leaving him bewildered. Moments later, Cyclops reappeared behind Libert, delivering a devastating blow that sent him sprawling. The monster mocked him, questioning if he had underestimated his speed due to his size. Libert's mother and stepmother watched in anguish as he fell. Libert was sent flying through the air, crashing hard onto the ground. Mina, witnessing the brutal defeat, cried out for her mother, her face contorted in terror as she watched the warrior fall. Triumphant, Cyclops declared that the Kate Sith would continue to provide him with the sacrifices he needed. Below, Mina was held tightly by her parents, her eyes wide with fear, utterly helpless in the face of the monster's decree. She clenched her fists, her expression tight with resolve. Mina knew she absolutely could not lose, especially now, after a few months had passed since the last devastating encounter. Her cousin, Igard, a young Kate Sith with light hair, noticed her tension and gently advised her to relax her shoulders. He warned that if she couldn't relax, she wouldn't be able to win against monsters she had previously defeated. The group of Kate Sith adventurers, including Mina, Igard, and Libert, stood in a grand, pillared hall. One of them cautioned against being too eager, while another confidently declared that they had discussed endlessly and made careful preparations for this very day, assuring everyone that if they worked together, victory would be theirs. Libert, standing beside Mina, acknowledged the truth in the statement, reminding them that they had properly carried out a preliminary investigation a month prior. Mina, her face softening into a determined smile, reassured herself and the others that everything would be fine. Libert, in turn, agreed with a resolute declaration. With their resolve solidified, Mina rallied her companions before a massive, ornate door. She declared it to be their enemy's stronghold, the deepest section of Sky Mountain, Cyclops' hideout, and asked if everyone was ready. Cautiously, she peered through a narrow crack in the imposing door, her eyes wide with anticipation. What she saw on the other side caused her eyes to widen further in shock, a gasp escaping her lips as she struggled to articulate her surprise. Inside, the hideout was not empty. Cyclops sat on a makeshift throne, surrounded by a menacing array of monsters, including 2 massive, one-eyed creatures, several smaller lizard-like beasts, and a swarm of bats. The Kate Sith group stood frozen, utterly bewildered by the unexpected scene, one of them exclaiming in disbelief, wondering what was happening. Mina, her face etched with confusion, questioned if she had made a mistake. Libert quickly dismissed the idea, stating that it couldn't be the case. It was Igard who, with a grim realization, concluded that they had been set up. The ambush was undeniable as Cyclops, the monstrous leader, revealed himself, gloating that he had grown tired of waiting. Mina, her cat ears flattened in alarm, confronted him, demanding to know if he had anticipated their arrival. The Cyclops merely chuckled, asserting his ability to perceive all their miserable thoughts. His words struck Mina with a chilling clarity. Their entire operation had been predicted long ago. She braced herself, a dagger clutched tightly in her hand, as the full weight of their predicament settled upon her. Despite the overwhelming odds, Mina rallied, shouting to her companions not to engage with the lesser monsters, but to focus their attacks solely on Cyclops. He merely responded with a mocking laugh, wondering aloud how many of them would survive his trap. Far from the ambush, in another part of the world, a different gathering was underway. 2 enigmatic figures sat at a grand round table, shrouded in shadow, their purpose yet unknown. At this table, Guras, wearing a distinctive witch's hat, addressed Albert, explaining that she was displaying the deepest section of Sky Mountain because he had suddenly asked her to share it. Albert, observing her intently, questioned her true intentions behind sharing such sensitive information. He gazed into a crystal ball, its surface reflecting a miniature image of Mina and another Kate Sith, seemingly trapped within the very dungeon Guras had mentioned. Guras, growing increasingly agitated, slammed her hand on the table, demanding not to be ignored. Another woman, Selly, with long, flowing hair, calmly advised Guras not to get so riled up, addressing her affectionately as Marinchan. Guras, flustered, covered her face, admitting that it was true she was several hundred years older and should grow up. She then revealed her true name, Merlin, one of the 7 heroes, known as the Great Sage. Selly, smiling serenely, confirmed Guras' long-standing temperament and introduced herself as Selly, another of the 7 heroes, the Virgin of Salvation. Selly continued to tease Merlin, suggesting that others wouldn't notice her if she acted more assertively, implying that her small stature and certain aspects made her less conspicuous. Merlin, now thoroughly exasperated, vehemently protested, insisting that she was not Marin and was not small because she wanted to be, reiterating her true name. He, Guras, sat at the round table, observing the crystal ball, and remarked that his companions were surely loud. Albert and Selly were also present, their attention drawn to the unfolding events. Selly, with a thoughtful expression, questioned Guras, asking why he was showing them this particular fight, as skirmishes of this nature happened all the time. Albert then interjected, stating that the very fact Guras was deliberately showing them this during a round table meeting implied its significant relevance. Guras, in turn, reminded him not to ignore her. Albert, with a subtle smile, dismissed the notion of special relevance, claiming he merely wanted to see it himself. Guras sighed, confirming his suspicion, and then Albert suggested they stop the transmission, citing their limited time. Guras expressed his discomfort with watching Kate Siths nearing their deaths, stating that the outcome of the fight was clear. Albert, however, reassured him, explaining that he would not suffer any losses by watching it. He then revealed, with a confident smirk, that Brat would be there, implying a deeper reason for his interest in the unfolding conflict. Meanwhile, back at the ambush, Mina, with a fierce cry, commanded her Kate Sith allies to fire. A volley of arrows and crossbow bolts rained down upon Cyclops, who reacted with a surprised grunt as the projectile struck him. Mina, her face etched with determination, urged her companions to keep fighting, acknowledging their dwindling supply of arrows. Her gaze fixed on Cyclops' single eye, she understood that destroying it was their only path to victory. Cyclops roared in agony as multiple arrows pierced his vulnerable eye. Mina, seeing their success, triumphantly declared that it had worked and immediately ordered the vanguard to attack. Enraged and in immense pain, Cyclops screamed about his injured eye. Clutching his wounded eye, Cyclops let out a guttural groan of pain, his massive form hunched over in anguish, while Mina stood nearby, poised for the next phase of the battle. He roared in pain as the Kate Sith's coordinated attack struck his eye. Mina, with a determined expression, lunged forward, her blade aimed at his leg, while Igard moved swiftly to support her. Despite his injury, he let out another pained cry, but Mina, her eyes burning with resolve, declared that the battle was going better than she had anticipated. She vowed that he would regret underestimating them, fighting for her parents and the villagers suffering. She then directly challenged him, stating her intention to finish him now and settle all accounts. Cyclops, his single eye wide with a menacing grin, prepared for her assault. But his menacing grin widened further as he mockingly declared that his pain was just kidding. Mina's eyes widened in shock, unable to comprehend how he could still be fine after such a direct hit. With a sudden, powerful swing of his massive club, he unleashed a devastating attack, sending Mina, Igard, and Libert flying backward. Mina, struggling to regain her footing, cried out to her companions, urging them to hang in there. As she knelt, recovering from the blow, Mina stared at him in disbelief, demanding to know why his eye was fine and how he could withstand their attacks. He merely chuckled, taunting her to use her impaired intellect to figure it out, wondering aloud why she couldn't understand. Despite the setback, she refused to give up, asserting that she had not yet lost and could still continue the fight. A sudden realization then dawned on her. A magic barrier must have been generated by another monster, protecting Cyclops. Observing her, Cyclops declared the battle was already over, but Mina defiantly countered that it was quite on the contrary. He then sneered, telling the little girl that she seemed to have learned nothing from her father's foolish, rebellious acts, and promised she would witness the result of her foolishness with her own eyes. Mina, filled with regret, could only whisper an apology. As Mina stood, defeated and apologetic, he began to charge a devastating attack, his mouth wide open in a terrifying roar, ready to unleash his full power upon her. As Cyclops prepared his devastating attack, a new figure suddenly appeared, interrupting the tense standoff. He offered a simple apology for his tardiness. Mina, still reeling from the Cyclops' taunts and the impending attack, stared in disbelief at the newcomer, questioning his presence. He, however, dismissed her query, asserting that no particular reason was needed to intervene when someone as charming as her found herself in such a predicament. Her face flushed with annoyance. She retorted that this was hardly the time for jokes, demanding to know what he was truly saying. Ignoring her exasperation, he then introduced himself as Brat von Pistol, the first prince of the Pistol Kingdom. He explained that he had learned of the Kate Sith's predicament, as they were the kingdom's sworn friends, and had come forth to assist them. The chapter began with a declaration that the Black Pig Prince would become a hero. Brat, standing before a large Cyclops and a surprised Mina, apologized for his tardiness, explaining that he had been making necessary preparations for this precise day. Meanwhile, he had been overleveling by defeating orichalcum snakes. Mina, still reeling from his appearance, questioned him further, asking if he was truly the Pistol Kingdom's first prince. He confirmed her suspicion, expressing regret for having lied to her, but stating that at this point in the game, there was no longer any need to conceal his true identity. Mina, pointing at him with a bewildered expression, exclaimed that he was far too different from the rumors she had heard, which painted the first prince as an evil, ugly pig and an inept among inepts, with the second prince being the certain successor to the throne. Brat merely chuckled in response. The Cyclops, equally astonished, echoed Mina's disbelief, questioning how a prince could appear so brazenly in such a place, calling it the act of a fool among fools. Brat, however, maintained his smile, agreeing that he was indeed the evil, ugly pig prince they spoke of, but claimed he had recently undergone a change of heart and corrected his ways. He then declared himself to be the only person foolish enough to undertake such an endeavor while still holding the title of prince. Mina stared at him, her eyes wide with a dawning realization that he was indeed the Pistol Kingdom's first prince, yet he seemed like a completely different person. She blushed, her thoughts racing, finding him surprisingly cool, especially after he had casually called her cute. Brat observed her reaction. Mina, her expression serious, then asked him what he intended to do next. Brat, his gaze firm, ordered her and her comrades to gather their injured and immediately leave the area. As he issued his command, the small bat-like creatures, his summoned minions, fluttered around the area, their glowing eyes observing the scene. The Cyclops, however, remained, extending a massive hand as if to grab something or someone, his expression still one of defiance. Meanwhile, Brat turned his back to the Cyclops, declaring his intent to eliminate the monster. Mina, observing the Cyclops, realized the true danger lay in its frightening ability to endlessly spawn minions, which also granted it potent magical healing capacities. She vehemently protested his decision, reminding him that he himself had previously stated there was no chance of winning against such a foe, calling his current plan unreasonable. The Cyclops, overhearing their exchange, mocked Brat, questioning if he was dumb to think he could defeat it. Brat, undeterred, clarified that he was not ordering anyone else to stay and fight. He would face the Cyclops by himself, of his own free will. Brat then explained that the Cyclops' earlier attack, which had severed his arm, was merely a surprise tactic against a good-for-nothing blockhead, like him, implying it was not a true display of strength. The Cyclops, growing visibly enraged, accused Brat of getting carried away and declared that his interest in the show had been completely dampened. He vowed that none of them would escape, promising to slaughter them all without exception. With a furious roar, the Cyclops lunged, swinging its massive club towards Brat, who stood his ground. Mina cried out a warning, urging him to watch out. Mina watched in disbelief as the Cyclops' club, despite its immense size and momentum, stopped dead in its tracks, unable to move even an inch. The Cyclops, equally stunned, demanded to know what Brat had done. Brat effortlessly held the massive club, remarking on its surprising lightness and questioning if the Cyclops had stopped applying force. The Cyclops, struggling against Brat's grip, was aghast, wondering where such a puny human could possess strength rivaling its own. Mina, witnessing this impossible feat, finally understood that Brat had stopped the Cyclops' attack. The Cyclops, still reeling from the shock, accused Brat of using strengthening magic, stating it wouldn't make sense otherwise. Mina, observing the scene, silently pondered the implications, realizing the Cyclops' assumption was incorrect. He continued to mock the Cyclops, asking if he was perhaps dumb for not realizing his power wasn't due to strengthening magic. Brat pointed to his own head, suggesting the monster should have discerned the fluctuations of his magic power. The Cyclops reacted with a furious roar, demanding to know who Brat was calling dumb. Internally, he struggled to regain his composure, dismissing Brat as a mere blockhead. Brat, still holding the massive club, calmly observed the Cyclops, pondering that there must be some trick to the monster's actions. The Cyclops, meanwhile, resolved to continue his straightforward assault. He believed that by relentlessly attacking, Brat's trick would eventually run out, leaving him vulnerable. He continued his relentless assault, wondering how long Brat could maintain his composure. Brat, however, remained unfazed, calmly stating that the monster's efforts were useless, no matter how many times he tried. The Cyclops unleashed a furious barrage of blows, laughing maniacally as he questioned how long Brat could withstand such a continuous assault, panting heavily from the exertion. Brat, standing amidst the cracked stone floor, finally revealed his secret. He was using no trick at all. He noted that even a muscle brain like the Cyclops was finally beginning to grasp the truth. The Cyclops was utterly stunned by Brat's declaration, his single eye wide with disbelief as he questioned what he had just heard. Enraged and desperate, the Cyclops declared that if things had come to this, he would crush Brat with full force, calling upon his minions. Brat, meanwhile, was shocked by the monster's sudden shift in tactics, realizing the Cyclops was calling for help. Brat looked up as several bat-like monsters descended from above, their single eyes glowing. He remarked on the unfairness of being targeted by so many when he was alone. His hand snapped, and a hexagonal, fire-resistant magic barrier instantly formed around Mina, shielding her from any potential harm. He considered the situation, realizing he needed to clear the area of the bat-like creatures, but he mustn't harm the Kate Sith villagers in the process. With a focused gaze, he began to conjure a spell, a small flame dancing in his palm as he prepared to unleash a fire wave. The Cyclops, observing his preparations, scoffed, believing Brat was resorting to low-tier magic. However, the fire wave erupted with devastating force, creating a massive explosion that obliterated the surrounding area. The Cyclops stared in utter shock, his single eye wide with disbelief, while Mina, safely protected within the barrier, gasped in surprise at the sheer power of the attack. Inside the now intact barrier, Mina and the other Kate Sith villagers remained unharmed. Brat, rubbing the back of his head, expressed relief that the spell had worked out well, admitting it was his first time using such a powerful technique. The Cyclops, reeling from the unexpected turn of events, questioned reality itself. All his subordinates had been annihilated by a single, supposedly low-tier magic attack. He wondered if he was merely dreaming. Brat looked up at the Cyclops, who had now transformed into a larger, more muscular, and menacing form. He calmly acknowledged the transformation, then challenged the monster to demonstrate the true extent of its power in this new state. He decided it was time to finish the encounter, pondering if the Cyclops' critical situation assessment systems had triggered its ultimate transformation so quickly. Mina cried out in distress as the Cyclops, now desperate, threatened Brat. He warned that if Brat dared to lay a hand on him, all the Kate Sith villagers would be massacred, revealing he had instructed his subordinates to carry out the deed with just one command. Brat, however, merely responded with a subtle, knowing smirk. He responded to the Cyclops' threat with a calm, confident smile, granting him permission to proceed as he wished. Meanwhile, Mina, who had been observing the confrontation, gasped in surprise. Her cat ears perked up as the Cyclops' menacing grin faltered into a look of utter shock. The Cyclops' surprise was well-founded, for Brat then revealed that he had already taken care of all the monster's subordinates, having dealt with them upon arriving at the village. He even mused that the Cyclops would have committed such cowardly acts in the final quest anyway, implying a deeper understanding of the monster's nature. Behind him, the Kate Sith villagers, including Mina, Libert, Igard, and others, watched with expressions of relief and gratitude. The Cyclops, now utterly enraged, roared in disbelief, realizing Brat had outmaneuvered him completely. He had been put through the village, only to find his plans thwarted and his minions defeated, as evidenced by the scattered debris of what appeared to be a destroyed map or plan. Moments later, the Kate Sith villagers, led by Mina, approached Brat with beaming smiles, presenting him with a celebratory cake as a heartfelt thank you for saving them. The Cyclops, however, remained fixated on his humiliation, his fanged mouth agape as he internally protested, believing himself to be an elite monster and that this turn of events must be some kind of mistake. His thoughts continued to race, struggling to comprehend that a mere human could not only be stronger than him, but also possess the cunning to outwit him so thoroughly. He further lamented his predicament, questioning how he, a great monster endowed with overwhelming talent, could have made enemies and allies alike yield to him only to be bested in such a manner. Brat listened, his expression unreadable. Unable to contain his fury and wounded pride any longer, the Cyclops lunged forward, roaring a furious challenge as he swung a massive fist directly at Brat. With effortless grace, Brat swiftly ducked beneath the monstrous blow, his eyes sharp and focused, completely unfazed by the Cyclops' desperate attack. He moved with blinding speed, a swift, decisive strike aimed at his enraged foe. The Cyclops' massive body crumpled, its head severed cleanly from its shoulders, landing with a thud on the tiled floor. Mina, witnessing the impossible feat, could only gasp in disbelief. Yet, from the detached head, a voice of utter shock and denial echoed. Questioning how someone like Brat could achieve such a feat, he simply affirmed his action, his gaze unwavering. The Cyclops' head, still conscious, let out a guttural laugh, admitting its grave error in underestimating a human like Brat. Brat, his expression grim, acknowledged the monster's dangerous nature, realizing that for the sake of the future, such a threat could not be left unchecked. Suddenly, Brat's calm demeanor shattered as he cried out Mina's name, his eyes wide with urgency. She looked back, confused by his sudden alarm, but he commanded her to take the injured and her unscathed comrades and flee the area as quickly as possible. Mina, her face etched with concern, began to protest, worried about his safety, But he cut her off, insisting she not worry and simply go. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Mina quickly gathered the Kate Sith villagers, urging them to hurry and escape the dangerous chamber, leaving Brat to face the lingering threat alone. He gripped Mina firmly, declaring he would take her with him. He knew this was the best he could manage given their limited time, intending to protect the door they had retreated through with guard magic. Suddenly, an explosion erupted. As debris flew from the now shattered doorway, she looked back in shock, calling out Brat's name in alarm. The doorway completely gave way, billowing smoke and dust into the passage. She could only let out a distressed cry as the destruction unfolded. The grand entrance to a structure, now partially damaged, stood open as a group of individuals, including a cat-eared girl, peered into the darkness beyond. They called out, their voices laced with concern, searching for someone named Brat. Her face etched with worry, she looked around at the debris-strewn ground. She desperately wondered where Brat could be amidst the destruction. Her concern quickly turned to action as she began issuing commands. She instructed those with healing magic to tend to the injured, while the rest were to join her in the search for Brat, recalling his last act of forming a protective barrier to shield them from harm. She continued her frantic search, her voice echoing as she repeatedly called out Brat's name, hoping for any sign of him from within the rubble. Nearby, another cat-eared girl, with lighter hair, coughed weakly, tears welling in her eyes. She lamented that she hadn't even had the chance to thank him yet, her gaze fixed on the surrounding destruction. Suddenly, the dark-haired cat-eared girl spotted a hand emerging from a pile of debris. Her eyes widened in shock and relief as she cried out, alerting everyone that he was there. A cat-eared boy quickly moved to assist, pulling Brat from the rubble. Brat, though disheveled, appeared unharmed, a gentle smile gracing his lips as he was helped to his feet. The dark-haired cat-eared girl rushed forward, embracing Brat tightly, tears streaming down her face. She confessed her immense relief, having feared he had perished in the chaos. Brat, in turn, offered a quiet word of thanks. As Brat stood among them, the surrounding crowd erupted in cheers, celebrating his miraculous survival. They hailed him, marveling that he had endured such a powerful explosion. He gently embraced the cat-eared girl, apologizing for causing her worry. He reassured her, stating that he did not pretend to die so easily. Moments later, the village erupted in a joyous celebration. Brat, the cat-eared girl, and their companions joined the villagers in a toast. Amidst the revelry, someone remarked on the rumors that Brat was actually Prince Brat of the Fishdale Kingdom, to which he simply acknowledged that much had indeed transpired. The villagers continued to heap praise upon him, calling him the giant killer hero for putting his life on the line to save them. An elder expressed profound gratitude, asking how they could ever repay him. Brat, however, humbly dismissed their accolades, while the blonde cat-eared girl, overwhelmed, could only think of how truly amazing he was. As the celebration continued, the cat-eared boy noted that Mina, the dark-haired cat-eared girl, got drunk far too easily. Indeed, Mina, visibly intoxicated, pointed directly at Brat and loudly proposed marriage, declaring him the village's hero. Exasperated by the drunken antics, Brat loudly commanded everyone to quiet down. He then declared that there was still something left for him to do, and with that, he stepped out of the tent, leaving the boisterous party behind. Outside the village, under the night sky, Brat stood facing a group of monsters, including a towering cyclops, a mushroom-like creature, and a snail-like beast. He calmly informed them that he had been waiting for their arrival. The cyclops, its single eye wide with emotion, expressed profound gratitude to Brat Sama for freeing them from the yoke of the cyclops, promising to repay his kindness without fail one day. As the cyclops extended a clawed hand, Brat told them there was no need to repay the favor, but he did want them to keep their earlier promise. He then inquired if they, the original inhabitants of Sky Mountain, had endured many hardships. He then extended his own hand towards the Cyclops, proposing that they make a contract. Brat placed a ring on the Cyclops' finger, initiating a process known as Tame. This mechanic, when used in conjunction with the Monster Tamer ring, offered a certain probability of befriending monsters after battle. He smiled warmly at the small mushroom monster, declaring that he would be counting on it from that moment forward. The creature, overwhelmed with surprise and joy, realized that Brat had even given it a name, Laud. A young woman with cat ears exclaimed that Brat was a total monster, having achieved so much in just a month. Another young woman with blonde hair and cat ears expressed her astonishment, confirming that he truly had defeated it. Brat, wearing his distinctive hat, listened with a look of surprise. As the conversation continued, a figure in a large wizard hat, Marin, declared that the meeting was over, stating that she had some important matters to attend to. Brat, turning to face her, questioned what could possibly be more important than their current discussion, while the blonde cat-eared girl added that Brat's participation in the upcoming Sword Festival was not to be missed. He then inquired if the Sword Festival was an academy tournament for the Fishdale youngster, and if he, Brat, would also be making an appearance there. Meanwhile, Duras, a young woman with light hair and a small crown, excitedly declared herself a fan of Brat and urged Marin to come along. Marin, however, sharply reminded her that they were still in the middle of a meeting, calling her an airhead. Brat, looking annoyed, questioned why he should go, suggesting Duras go by herself, while the blonde cat-eared girl looked down, seemingly embarrassed by the commotion. Yielding to her enthusiasm, Marin reluctantly agreed to go, stating that she adored Duras, who was the only one capable of using magic among them. She then clarified that her decision was not to be misunderstood. She would eventually need to ascertain Brat's abilities herself. She added that they could extend the current meeting for as long as needed, as they could take all of them there instantly. Later, She found herself alone, looking at a crystal ball, realizing that Gyuras had already left. She muttered to herself that there was still a lot to discuss. Far away, in the dream realm, a dark, ominous castle known as Dream Castle, the base of the Demon King, stood beneath a swirling void. Within its walls, a monstrous, horned creature screamed in agony, its body racked with pain. Within the castle's grand hall, a shadowy figure on a throne, the Demon King, was being addressed by a minion. The minion was warned to watch his words, as the human in question had only defeated creatures like the Cyclops. The Demon King then questioned whose throat had claimed that a mere human could reach such a place. As the Demon King's concerns about the encroaching human threat lingered in the dream realm, one of his grotesque minions groveled before a new, elegant figure, apologizing profusely for its perceived impertinence. This figure, identified as the gluttonous devourer Beelzebub, dismissed the apology with a casual wave, stating he was not some mere monster to be intimidated by such a display. He then casually dismissed the groveling minion with a flick of his hand, sending it sprawling across the floor. His sinister grin widened as he mused that if the Demon King had fully awakened, the minion would have faced eternal torture and been cast into an eternal living hell for its foolishness. His thoughts then turned to the human who had defeated the Cyclops, realizing that this potentially dangerous threat needed to be dealt with sooner rather than later. The shadowy minion, who had been listening intently, voiced its own concerns, warning that underestimating the human could lead to a repeat of the Cyclops incident. It acknowledged that the human wasn't an immediate obstacle, but could become as problematic as one of the 7 heroes if allowed to grow stronger, and thus, they must not interfere with their carefully designed plans. He acknowledged the minion's point, agreeing that the human, specifically Gyuras Streisman and Pistol, needed to be dealt with. He then issued a chilling command to the groveling minion to dispose of the trash it had become, to which a small skeletal figure responded affirmatively. The shadowy minion, watching him depart, affirmed its readiness to proceed with their original plans, confident in its ability to ensure the human's demise. It also noted that the Demon Slayer was a particularly difficult individual to handle. It then pondered the specific challenge of eliminating the prince quietly, without the Demon Slayer noticing, realizing they would need someone unique for such a task. Just then, Beelzebub's attention was drawn to a new arrival, a wolf-like figure who eagerly offered their services, promising to handle the matter. He acknowledged them as the Garlov brothers, renowned for their mastery of transformation and their ability to operate in absolute secrecy. 3 distinct wolf-like figures stood before him, ready for their assignment. The Garlov brothers, having accepted their new directive, stood ready. Beelzebub, with a sinister smile, instructed them to personally demonstrate to the humans the grave error of opposing their might. He then commanded them to proceed immediately towards Pistol. Eagerly, they affirmed their readiness, accepting the mission with pleasure. Doll Master Lionetta, a woman of striking elegance, stood with a confident smile as a white-haired male questioned her, asking if it was truly necessary for her to handle the task of dealing with the beasts herself. She dismissed his concern, stating she did not mind going. She further clarified that erasing a human's existence was a trivial matter to her, implying no special reason for her involvement beyond her own will. The white-haired male, in turn, conceded that he had no reason to refuse if she insisted on going herself. However, Lionetta mused that simply taking candy from a baby would be dull. Instead, she intended to put on a grand show, suggesting a more elaborate and entertaining approach to her task. The white-haired male, observing her, inquired about the nature of this grand show she spoke of, a hint of surprise in his expression. Lionetta explained that this endeavor would be a significant step toward achieving their ultimate goal. She revealed they had found a suitable puppet they could use in Pistol, and addressing her small doll-like companion, Arietta, she declared that this would prove to be very entertaining. The white-haired male chuckled, finding her plan interesting, and granted her permission to proceed as she wished. She, in turn, affirmed that she would have done so even without his explicit instruction. Meanwhile, in a serene forest, a dark-haired girl with cat ears stood beside a majestic winged beast, the sounds of chirping birds filling the air. She turned her head, her expression one of mild surprise, and asked if he was already leaving. The white-haired male, now revealed to be the one she was addressing, responded that he had actually planned to leave the previous night, admitting he had stayed too long already. He bid farewell to Mina, promising they would meet again before long. She looked down, acknowledging his words with a quiet, "I see." As he began to walk away, Mina suddenly called out his name, her voice filled with urgency. He turned, surprised, as she ran towards him, her expression a mix of desperation and resolve. With a sudden lunge, she grabbed his scarf, pulling him back with unexpected force. He gasped in surprise, caught off guard by her actions. Before he could react, she leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, her eyes closed in a moment of heartfelt confession. I like you," she declared, her voice trembling slightly. Still reeling from the unexpected kiss and confession, he watched as Mina, now with tears welling in her eyes, urged him to go. "Let's see each other again," she cried, waving him off as the winged beast began to ascend. He looked back one last time, a faint smile gracing his lips, before turning his gaze forward. And so, the Black Pig Prince returned home, carried by his loyal mount. Mina stood on the ground, waving vigorously and shouting "See ya!" as the winged beast, carrying him, soared higher into the sky. Back in Pistol, he would soon face the Sword Festival. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, the elegant hem of a dark gown swept across a polished floor as Doll Master Lionetta moved with purpose. She stood on a high balcony, Arietta perched on her shoulder, gazing out at Pistol under a foreboding, eye-like celestial body. A sinister smile played on her lips, hinting at the hell that was about to break loose, all without the unsuspecting populace knowing. Brat, a young boy of 12, happily munched on a small pastry, finding the simple act quite enjoyable. Moments later, a flustered maid approached, apologizing to Brat, whom she addressed as Your Highness, explaining that she was quite busy at the moment. He, looking annoyed, wondered if Marie was here again, noting her persistent nature. Marie-sama, a young woman with long blonde hair and an elegant dress, stood nearby, having just arrived. Brat, still seated, firmly declared he would not go out, no matter what anyone said. Marie, also 12 years old, questioned his stubbornness, asking if staying in his room for so long wasn't boring, suggesting even a horseback ride would be more fun. Marie continued, explaining that her mother had taught her that soon-to-be married couples were meant to stay by each other's side and offer gentle support during tough times. Brat, however, angrily retorted that he had already said he wouldn't go, demanding to know why she was so concerned with what he did. He then shouted that he didn't care about any of that and ordered her to leave immediately, telling her not to come there anymore. Marie, unfazed by his outburst, simply asked, "Is that so?" She then calmly stated that in that case, she would not be coming here again. Brat's eyes suddenly snapped open, wide with a jolt of realization. He sat up abruptly, calling out Marie's name, and then realized with a gasp that it was only a dream. A small winged creature, resembling a goat, grumbled beside him, and Brat expressed his profound relief. He arrived at the Pishtal royal capital, Forflat, a sprawling city built upon a hill. The journey had been swift, and he expressed surprise at their quick arrival. The city was already bustling with activity, its daily life supported by magic technology, evident in the floating magic balls that served as basic infrastructure. Preparations for the Sword Festival were clearly well underway. He reflected on his past, acknowledging that before he had corrected his ways, he had always relied on Marie. Now, he resolved to win the championship at the Sword Festival, earn proper recognition, and then dedicate himself to making Marie happy. He instructed Gilgard to lower their altitude, preparing to enter the castle. He also considered resuming his training with Guras-san upon their return. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the air, signaling distress. The chaos erupted as monstrous, wolf-like figures, the Garlov brothers, rampaged through the streets, attacking the townspeople. They roared, calling for reinforcements, their presence spreading terror. One of them, a hulking werewolf-like creature, paused amidst the destruction, sensing an unfamiliar presence. He looked up, questioning who dared to intrude upon their rampage. Amidst the unfolding attack, a maid named Lena bravely shielded someone named Logi, warning the attackers not to take another step. Brat, witnessing the scene, recognized the assailants as werewolf lords, monsters of a caliber he identified as Cyclopes class, and wondered what such powerful creatures were doing there. He observed Lena's desperate attempt to protect her friends, realizing she was acting as a shield. Despite his usual desire to avoid standing out, he knew he could not ignore this. Meanwhile, the Garlov brother snarled, warning Lena to get out of his way, dismissing her as a mere dummy. A monstrous, wolf-like creature lunged forward, its jaws wide, but Brat von Fischtel moved with unexpected speed, intercepting the beast with a powerful shove. The creature cried out in pain as it was thrown back, while a blonde cat-eared girl watched, her eyes wide with terror. He immediately turned his attention to the blonde cat-eared girl, who lay on the ground, asking if she was all right. Behind him, the wolf-like creature recovered, its fangs bared in a silent snarl, ready to strike again. The blonde cat-eared girl, still visibly shaken, questioned aloud if the person who had just defeated such a monster with a single attack was truly Brat-sama. Nearby, another cat-eared girl and boy, equally astonished, confirmed his identity, expressing their disbelief at his sudden, overwhelming power. Brat, with a gentle smile, reassured the blonde cat-eared girl, telling her it was all right now and commending her for doing very well. The other cat-eared girl, however, playfully chided her for her loud exclamation, reminding her that Brat could hear her, while he simply confirmed his identity with a soft, "Yes, I am." Overwhelmed by the recent terror and the relief of his presence, the blonde cat-eared girl burst into tears, clinging tightly to Brat's chest and confessing how incredibly afraid she had been. He responded by gently patting her head, offering silent comfort. Moments later, a maid inquired about the events that had transpired. Brat, now composed, expressed his relief that everyone was safe. A blonde female then stepped forward, offering their deepest gratitude to His Highness for his intervention, a sentiment echoed by a white-haired male. He then explained that while the monster had been formidable, Albert-sama and some knights had rushed to their aid. The blonde cat-eared girl, still clinging to him, interrupted to add that she had been out shopping with Lena when the monster appeared. The maid, however, interjected with a more pressing concern, stating that Albert-sama had ultimately been defeated and required immediate medical attention. Brat absorbed this information, reflecting that it was no great feat for a werewolf to infiltrate a city, given their ability to change into human form. He mused that such an event should not have occurred in what was known as the final quest, and expressed a quiet relief that nothing more serious had ultimately transpired. As the maid called out to him, Brat remained deep in thought, considering that werewolves were typically intelligent beings not prone to such flashy, violent displays. He concluded that there must be some other, hidden purpose behind this incident, finding the entire situation truly strange. He was greeted warmly upon his return, with Lena, his maid, exclaiming her joy and pride in his newfound strength and bravery. She praised him as amazing, but then quickly reminded him of his responsibilities. urging him to register for the upcoming sword festival as a participant. Another maid, Loji, chuckled at the exchange. Moments later, the carriage carrying him rumbled along, its wheels turning steadily as he continued his journey. He arrived at the grand entrance of the Wind Destal Royal Academy of Magic, a place he had not seen in a long time. As he disembarked and began to walk towards the academy, Lena remained by the carriage, her expression still etched with concern. She continued to fret, internally lamenting that he should attend school and training, especially after demonstrating such incredible strength against the monster. She worried he was setting a bad example by delaying his return, despite his recent heroic feat. He, meanwhile, felt a blush creep up his neck, overwhelmed by her persistent scolding and praise. As he walked through the academy grounds, he felt the weight of countless gazes upon him. He reflected on his past, remembering how he had been relentlessly bullied, and wondered what everyone would think of him now, finding the sudden attention deeply awkward. He mused that he had changed so much that they might not even recognize him, yet whispers followed him. Some students wondered who the handsome gentleman was, while others questioned if he was not, in fact, the infamous Black Pig. Back at the carriage, Lena overheard the circulating rumors that he had changed both physically and internally, striving to serve his people, and that he had defeated a terrifying monster in the city. She found it impossible to believe, yet the urgency to reach her classroom quickly pressed upon her. Meanwhile, a student with spiky orange hair, Dino, dismissed the rumors as baseless. He scoffed at the idea that the Black Pig could have become handsome or defeated a monster with a single attack, wondering if people were mistaking Brat for someone else, someone he was supposedly afraid of. Dino then turned to Brat, confidently asserting that no matter how one looked at it, Brat was still the same stupid and hopelessly ugly Black Pig everyone talked about. A young maid, her face contorted in anger, fiercely defended her master, Brat, from the rude remarks of another boy. "You're being rude to Brat-sama," she cried, while Brat himself looked on, startled by the sudden outburst. Meanwhile, a white-haired young man called out to the boy, "Loji." The boy, Loji, responded, his expression one of dawning realization. "She is." The maid continued her impassioned defense, declaring that Brat was none other than the true first prince of the Pishtal Kingdom. Brat, still looking somewhat taken aback, stood beside her as she made her bold assertion. The maid, now composed, offered an apology for her earlier rudeness, while Brat smiled gently. Loji, however, recognized her, noting that it had been a while since they last met. He observed that she had changed significantly, making it difficult to recognize her at first, but recalled her as His Highness Brat's personal maid and the Black Pig. He also mused that the ape was not present. Her eyes wide with shock, the maid listened as Brat, his expression now stern, confronted Loji. He accused Loji of attempting to grab him and disparaged him as a good-for-nothing master who had a maid befitting him. Brat, his gaze firm, asserted that he was merely speaking the truth. He declared that he would not tolerate any abusive language directed towards his maid, who stood protectively behind him, her expression still one of concern. Loji, addressing the white-haired young man, requested that he cease dramatizing and degrading the maid. The white-haired man countered, stating that Loji had not even attempted to lay a finger on her. The maid, a faint blush on her cheeks, watched as Brat extended his hand towards Loji, challenging him with a question. "And if I don't want to?" Loji, a slight smile playing on his lips, observed Brat's gesture. With a surge of power, Brat seized Loji's hand, a visible magical aura emanating from his grasp. "I won't let you refuse," he stated with unwavering resolve. Loji recoiled in shock, questioning the nature of the power Brat was releasing and its immense strength. He stood nearby as Dino, still fuming from their previous encounter, was discussed by others. A maid, Lena, then approached Brat, asking if he had seen Albert-sama, praising his handsomeness, while a blonde female observed the scene. Dino, overhearing the comments about him being troublesome, reacted with a furious expression, asserting that no one should dare underestimate. As Dino's frustration mounted, Brat, with a stern and powerful presence, commanded him to stop his outburst. Brat's intervention was quickly followed by the arrival of Albert, a distinguished blonde male, who questioned Brat's behavior, while Dino remained in the background, observing. Albert sternly instructed Brat not to embarrass him further, stating that any shame brought upon Brat, as one of his close aides, would also be his own. Dino attempted to interject, calling Brat a pig, but Albert silenced him, reiterating his command for them to stop. Albert then turned his attention to Brat, expressing concern about an injury Brat sustained at the public square yesterday. Brat, however, dismissed the concern, stating that Albert's associate had been causing trouble, and his maid had also been rude. Brat's words caused Albert to pause, a realization dawning on him that Brat was referencing his own defeat by the same monster Brat had managed to kill. Recovering quickly, Albert feigned concern, insisting he was simply worried about Brat and offering to check him for injuries. Brat, however, rejected Albert's offer, calling him annoying and accusing him of trying to catch him off guard. He declared he would not fall for such a ploy and would not let his guard down, challenging Albert to a fight at the upcoming sword festival. Dino watched, surprised by the escalating tension. Albert, with a serious expression, issued a final, pointed warning to Brat, telling him to keep in mind that he seemed to be aiming for the throne, whether by taking it or having it handed to him. Albert's warning still echoed, but Brat's attention was drawn by Dino, who called out that they were leaving. Brat, looking surprised, pondered the implications of the throne. Still processing the news, Brat listened as Dino explained that the next king would be decided at the sword festival. Brat felt he was being misunderstood again, while while others around them reacted with shock to this significant announcement. A fight between brothers for the succession had suddenly broken out. He then reflected on the situation, a thoughtful expression on his face, realizing that it seemed he had successfully avoided a death flag after all. For now, he concluded, this turn of events should be fine. However, his moment of contemplation was abruptly interrupted as Dino and a cat-eared girl, both looking exasperated, scolded him for being late. Being tardy on his first day back was no laughing matter, they insisted. And so his school life began. With the sword festival now clearly in sight, a series of new, exciting days had begun for Brat. He bid farewell to Marin and Giras, confirming he was off to class and wishing them a good day. In a grand, arched classroom, a young student named Brat sat, his attention drawn to a blackboard. He pondered the profound concept of the principle of equivalent exchange, a topic he knew was deeply connected to the great alchemist Merlin and the parallel world of wisdom. He continued to reflect, his thoughts shifting to a specific text, Advanced Alchemy, a collaborative work by two individuals. Still in the classroom, he gazed out a window, a sense of boredom washing over him. He realized it was time to review his past objectives and consider new goals for the future. Later, Brat found himself discussing a note with Giras. The note starkly declared his reincarnation - death confirmed, revealing he had been reborn as a villain in a world riddled with death flags. It further stated that these flags would be recovered after 4 years. As he processed this, he was seen walking down a hallway, then looking out a window, the chilling thought echoing in his mind. For years later, he sat, quill in hand, meticulously writing. He recalled his previous life's memories, initially believing he was safe, but then a grim realization dawned. He was one of the demon kings for heavenly kings, and the scenario would inevitably lead to his defeat. He understood he had to fundamentally solve the problem. Above him, a masked figure, implied to be the demon king, declared that the demon king had summoned him. A sudden surge of determination transformed Brat's expression into a confident, almost cunning smile. He exclaimed, a spark in his eye, that he would not be deterred. Back in the classroom, he mentally assessed his situation. His current level stood at 56, a stark contrast to the class average, which he estimated to be around 10 to 15. He concluded that he had plenty of room to maneuver. His thoughts then turned to Marie, who stood before him, sword in hand. He was confident he could win the sword dance competition. However, he was surprised when Marie suddenly announced her intention to break their engagement, an event that was not part of the scenario he knew. He resolved to prevent the death event, even if it seemed unrelated to this new development. He affirmed to himself that he would not lose, yet a cautious part of him acknowledged that even with increased strength, the possibility of failure was not zero. A small winged creature floated beside him, seemingly offering silent encouragement. A close-up on his eyes revealed a deeper realization. He truly desired companions. He reflected on his current predicament, realizing that even after his reincarnation, he had no true friends. Tears welled in his eyes, but then a fierce determination ignited within him, his gaze hardening. He would not simply wait for his fated end. With a renewed resolve, he declared his intention to act, asserting that companions did not necessarily have to be human. He glanced at a ring on his finger, a subtle reminder of his purpose, before the scene shifted to him sitting in a classroom, looking out a window with a thoughtful expression. Meanwhile, the elder, beads of sweat forming on his brow, leaned in and cautiously asked Brat if he would be willing to answer his question. Brat, looking surprised, admitted he had not been paying attention. Albert then took over, explaining that 2 major processes were required to create a philosopher's stone: the extraction of highly concentrated magical materials and their fusion with a magical guide. He further elaborated that while advanced alchemy could melt any substance, achieving a perfect solid form remained an insurmountable challenge. The elder, clearly impressed by Brat's grasp of the complex subject, exclaimed his admiration, praising him as truly befitting the Prince of Fishdale. Brat offered a grateful smile to the relieved elder, acknowledging his words. Beside him, a small, horned, winged creature observed the exchange with keen interest. Suddenly, a loud, jarring sound echoed through the air, startling Brat. He looked up, questioning the source of the disturbance, while both the elder and Albert also turned their gazes skyward. Brat wondered if it could be a monster, perhaps from the magic training ground. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at the sky, a chilling realization dawning upon him about the potential implications if his suspicion proved true. Driven by this urgent understanding, Brat began to sprint through the arched hallway, convinced he needed to reach the source of the commotion without delay. He cautiously peeked around a corner, his gaze falling upon a sign that read, 5th Magic Training Ground. He muttered to himself that he had indeed heard this was the location. He arrived at the 5th Magic Training Ground, his senses alert for any sign of the disturbance he had heard. The area, however, was eerily silent and empty, a hollow quiet settling around him. He wondered if everyone had already departed. A young woman with dark hair, in a state of undress, turned to face a surprised Brat, who had seemingly entered a room where she was changing. She warned him that he was being rude by staring. Moments later, Brat lay prostrate on the floor, his face pressed against the ground, seemingly having collapsed or been knocked down. The dark-haired woman stood over him, her expression stern, as he stammered apologies. She questioned his behavior, asking why he had been acting so strangely since earlier. She grew visibly agitated, demanding to know what he was hiding. Brat tried to explain, but she cut him off, asserting that her country valued strength above all else, and that weakness was not tolerated. She then challenged him, asking if he was hiding something from her. With a confident smile, she declared that her country, Dastria, operated on the principle of the strong preying on the weak, and that strength was justice. Brat looked on, surprised by her revelation. He then formally introduced himself as Prince Brat von Fischtel, and to her astonishment, he identified her as Princess Carol of Dastria, stating it was an honor to meet her. She was taken aback, wondering how he knew her identity. Brat, now sitting up, apologized for his previous appearance, implying he was once more muscular and asking her not to inquire further. Carol, still in her state of undress, looked at him with a surprised expression, her arms crossed. She sighed, telling him to stop being so formal and that he could simply call her Carol. Brat then inquired about the prince's purpose, but first, he politely asked her to get dressed. Now fully dressed in a formal suit, Carol stood confidently, explaining that Dastria faced the high possibility of annihilation. She introduced herself as Princess Carol of Dastria and one of the 7 heroes, known as Cascade, and indicated the blonde knight beside her as her comrade. She apologized for the suddenness of her request and asked to be allowed to explain the situation. She continued to explain the dire situation of Dastria, revealing that her country was destined for ruin in a war against Elniad. She recounted how her father, the Emperor, and her comrade Cascade were assassinated in that conflict, and she herself only survived because she had been staying in another country. She further elaborated that Elniad and its allied nation, the Kingdom of Pearls, were filled with hatred, and that all of this had been orchestrated by Beelzebub from the very beginning. For this reason, she, Carol, would become a companion to the hero, cooperating with the 4 heavenly kings to exact her revenge. She listened intently as she explained that the current situation was not merely a game scenario, and that if things continued as they were, Dastria would indeed be destroyed. He then asked if there was a way to avoid the worst-case scenario, suggesting that a war might break out soon. She, however, cut him off, telling him to be quiet and listen. She asserted that even if they were to fight, Dastria was invincible. He questioned her, asking if she had any basis for such a bold claim, finding her words unpleasant. She looked at him with a sharp gaze, stating that while his appearance may have changed, his true nature remained that of a foolish black pig. She then challenged him, asking if he truly believed she had no basis for her claims, especially coming from the country of beauty and martial arts, Dastria. He tried to interject, asking her to wait, as he still had something to say. She dismissed him, stating she had no time to humor him and that he was being rude. She continued, calling him persistent. She then revealed that today was the day of the peace conference with the king of Elniad and her father. He reacted with shock, realizing that the conference was actually a betrayal. Albert_1, his expression urgent, demanded to know the whereabouts of the Empress and the safety of Carol's family following the recent conference. He also inquired about Carol's own condition. She confirmed his query, stating that the conference had concluded without incident, resulting in a positive step towards peace between the 2 nations. She reassured him that her mother and brother were well and unchanged, urging him not to worry. A faint glow emanated from an orb held gently in her hand. He acknowledged the successful conference and the safety of her family, but then questioned if someone like Prince Vishtal had been involved. Carol, with a sharp gaze, declared that while she would not know if it concerned only her life, if it involved her family, silence would not suffice. Suddenly, Albert_1 was struck by a swift attack. He barely registered the impact as a blade pierced his side, sending him reeling. He looked up to see Dino Swartzer, who grinned confidently. Nearby, Guras, Lena, and another blonde female admired Albert_1's sword skills, noting his improvement. Dino, however, declared that practice was over for the day. Albert_1, surprised, questioned why, especially with the sword dance festival approaching. He dismissed Albert_1's concerns, stating that he would handle things himself today and that Albert_1 would not be defeated a second time. Albert_1 bowed in acknowledgement. Later, Albert_1 practiced alone, striking barrels with his sword. The girls continued to praise his skill, remarking that he was almost as good as Brat, though he still lost to him. He clenched his teeth in frustration, cursing under his breath. He wondered why his brother was always so highly regarded. He remained on the ground, his fist clenched tightly, consumed by the bitter taste of defeat and the gnawing frustration of being overshadowed. As he seethed, a figure emerged, questioning if he was still the same as before. She spoke of his sparring match with Wolfrode 2 months prior, remarking that he couldn't even speak of his true strength then. Stunned, he demanded to know her identity. She continued, asserting that his brother's fighting style was unforgettable and incomparable to what it once was. He again demanded her name, but she merely smirked, dismissing his question as trivial. He was clearly losing his composure. With a sly smile, she offered to make him stronger, asking for his consideration. He, however, was in no mood for such proposals, angrily telling her to be silent. She observed that he was not acting like his usual self. She then reminded him not to forget that he could call upon her if he ever needed power, before turning to depart. He watched, stunned, then shouted for her to wait, noticing a faint splatter of blood on her dress as she vanished. Left alone, he seethed, wondering what exactly was happening. Meanwhile, preparations were advancing, and the sword dance festival was about to begin, with Carol and Brat standing together, observing the unfolding events. On the same day, after school, the 9th chapter began. The Black Prince appears. Alberto, changing out of his uniform, reflected on the succubus's presence, feeling as though she was observing the turmoil within his heart, mocking his efforts to gain power. He then resolved that he would defeat his brother, even without anyone else's assistance. As Alberto continued to ponder, Dino, an energetic student, ran past him, calling out a warning not to get into trouble, as he was off to practice for the upcoming sword festival. Moments later, Dino was practicing archery, but his shot went wide, missing the target entirely. Another student called out, asking if he was all right, as Dino seemed startled by something. Dino smirked, thinking about how some people tried to gain skill through last-minute, intense training, believing it wouldn't truly improve their abilities. Before heading home, he decided to make a quick stop at his usual spot. There, he found Jessica and Mira diligently practicing their sword forms. Dino, observing them with binoculars, became visibly excited, exclaiming about Jessica's unchanging strength and Mira's undeniable cuteness. Jessica, hearing his loud exclamations, looked over with a puzzled and slightly annoyed expression, while Mira also appeared confused by his outburst. Dino continued to watch, fantasizing that if he won the sword festival, he would surely become popular with the girls. As he reveled in his thoughts, he noticed Alberto walking away and called out, asking if he would be participating in the sword festival. Alberto merely offered a non-committal sound in response. He confronted Alberto, boldly declaring that it was obvious Alberto would challenge him in the upcoming festival. Alberto, however, seemed distracted, his gaze fixed on a new, smirking student who laughed and questioned if Alberto truly wouldn't participate. Alberto silently wondered who this new, confident individual was. Moments later, Dino fled in a panic, leaving his bag behind as he scrambled away from the scene, his face etched with fear. Alberto remained, looking down at the ground, a silent witness to Dino's abrupt departure. Dino collapsed to his knees, utterly bewildered by the events, stammering about not understanding such a student. The smirking individual, however, simply remarked that this situation was perfect for the sword festival, his words carrying an unsettling undertone. 1 week passed, and the grand arena stood ready. A voice boomed, welcoming everyone to the highly anticipated event. The festival had reached its final day, and the air crackled with anticipation for the long-awaited main event. Alberto stood among a group of other students, including the smirking individual and a new, cloaked figure, all awaiting their turn. As he waited, Alberto's attention was drawn by a faint, familiar voice. He realized he had heard it before, a memory stirring within him. High above the bustling crowd, King Castral von Vishutl, the monarch of Vishutl, observed the proceedings from a private box, his presence lending an air of solemn importance to the festival. Down in the arena, a cheerful host in a bunny outfit announced the commencement of the opening ceremony, her voice echoing with excitement. She then declared that it was time for the contestants to make their entrance. With that cue, Alberto, the smirking student, the cloaked figure, and 2 other new contestants began their walk, stepping forward into the grand arena, ready to face the challenges ahead. Alberto raised his hand, acknowledging the crowd. The lively bunny girl host, Rosie, playfully acknowledged Alberto, asking if he had been watching her. She then declared him incredibly cute, causing him to blush furiously and deny knowing her, despite her persistent gaze. Rosie, however, seemed to know him well, proclaiming her support for him in the upcoming events. Meanwhile, King Castral Vishutl addressed the assembled students of Wendestal Academy, expressing gratitude for their attendance at the sword festival. He announced the imminent start of the preliminary rounds, but first, he intended to introduce some distinguished guests. He then presented the first guest, the renowned mage, Marlin, from the nation of Gras, followed by the formidable knight, Gras. Marlin, with a flamboyant gesture, declared his excitement at seeing the legendary 7 heroes for the first time, particularly praising the goddess-like beauty of Lady Marlin. The bunny girl host, Rosie, interjected, reminding him that everyone could hear his self-aggrandizing remarks. Rosie, still in her role, inquired about Marlin's thoughts on the upcoming sword festival. He dismissed her question with a smirk, stating his only interest was in Platcoin. This declaration sent a wave of cheers through the crowd, with many students, including Rosie, enthusiastically calling out Platchon. Alberto, utterly bewildered, wondered why Gras had spoken of him and what this sudden attention meant. The unexpected spotlight left Alberto visibly overwhelmed, beads of sweat forming on his brow as he forced a strained smile. Dino and the mysterious student observed his discomfort from nearby. The mysterious student, after a brief glance at Alberto, turned his head away with a look of mild annoyance, muttering about how that muscle head, Marlin, had absolutely said something to cause this commotion. Dino, observing Alberto, pondered if his friend was acting strangely, perhaps even foolishly, given the sudden attention. Alberto, lost in his own thoughts, wondered if he was merely nervous, or if he was truly expected to win and become popular, a prospect that seemed both daunting and appealing. A grand statue of a one-eyed warrior, the sword Saint Nelfa, stood as a testament to the festival's purpose, to commemorate her legacy and recognize the strongest student in the nation. With no further preamble, King Castral Vishutl, standing before the eager crowd, declared the Sword Festival Battle Tournament officially open, signaling the beginning of the intense competition. He looked ahead with a determined gaze, his eyes reflecting a quiet resolve as the Sword Festival began. He then turned his attention to a young woman on a balcony above, silently vowing to her, "Marie, I will definitely win. Just watch me." She observed him with a serious, unwavering expression. Later, in a waiting room, he reflected on the upcoming preliminaries, noting that the main tournament would not begin until the afternoon. The vast arena, where the preliminary matches were to be held, stretched out before them. On the arena floor, the preliminaries were underway, involving hundreds of participants divided into groups of 10 or more. The rules were straightforward. He continued to observe, understanding that any combatant who fell from the stage or became unable to fight would be disqualified. Only one person from each group would advance to the main tournament. He chuckled softly, musing that the process would take a considerable amount of time, especially given the prestige of their school. Suddenly, an announcer's voice boomed, declaring the first match concluded. He, having just settled down, looked up in surprise. Indeed, she stood victorious, her opponent already defeated. He watched her, a realization dawning on him. He had expected Carol to be strong, but he never imagined she would win without even using magic. Her power was far beyond his initial estimation. The bunny girl host announced the first match, a speed contest, declaring it a battle of the Princess of Dastoria, and mentioning a participant named Roger. Alberto listened intently, observing the proceedings. He pondered the mention of the Princess of Dastoria. Meanwhile, other students in the stands discussed the tournament, noting that while Alberto was expected to win, the situation had become more unpredictable than imagined. Alberto realized he needed to remain vigilant. Moments later, the bunny girl host's voice boomed again, announcing the second match and the entrance of the players. Dino, standing beside Alberto, reacted with a startled expression, while Alberto glanced at him, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Dino's shock was palpable, his face contorted in disbelief and sweat beading on his brow. Alberto, still confused, watched his friend's intense reaction, wondering what could have caused such distress. Elsewhere, the succubus demon expressed her excitement to Mira, eager to see Platchon in action. Mira, however, simply noted that Marlon was still sound asleep, oblivious to the unfolding events. Alberto stood on the arena floor, surveying the other participants. He mused that only Dino was a familiar face among the qualifiers, and while the preliminary rounds had been manageable, he harbored a single, unspoken concern. With a determined stance, he declared his readiness. The bunny girl host's voice cut through the air, signaling the start of the match. Immediately, Roger lunged forward, launching a swift and aggressive attack. Alberto was caught off guard, his expression shifting to surprise. The bunny girl host, witnessing the sudden aggression, cried out a warning to Alberto, noting that his true nature was beginning to emerge. Roger continued his relentless assault, unleashing a torrent of raw magical power. The sheer force of his attack shocked Dino and the other observers, who watched in disbelief. Alberto braced himself, his eyes wide as the powerful magic surged towards him. With a smirk, Roger extended his hand, seemingly inviting Alberto to reach out. Dino, witnessing the dangerous maneuver, shouted a warning, calling Roger a fool. Alberto, still reeling from the previous blows, was caught by Roger's next move, sending him tumbling through the air. Roger maintained his confident smirk, commenting on the effectiveness of his attack and wondering if he could handle even more opponents at once. Meanwhile, the distressed bunny girl host announced the formation of an energy bomb, as a massive sphere of magical energy enveloped Alberto, trapping him completely. He remained trapped within the energy sphere, yet a confident smile played on his lips as Roger, his opponent, remarked on his status as an academy student. Roger then warned him about the energy bomb, a fourth-tier magic attack that would explode upon contact. Unfazed, Alberto declared that such an attack was nothing significant. As Roger extended his hand, the energy bomb solidified, pulsating with volatile power. Alberto watched it intently, his expression a mix of focus and slight surprise, as if analyzing the intricate magical construct. Moments later, the energy bomb detonated, but not against Alberto. Instead, Roger recoiled in shock, exclaiming that he was certain his attack had connected. Alberto, now walking away from the explosion with a triumphant smile, explained that while it was a complex maneuver, he had used the very power of the energy bomb to create a magical barrier between his hands, effectively deflecting it. With the threat neutralized, he declared that only he and Roger remained. Having dealt with Roger's attack, Alberto turned his gaze towards the stands, a wide smile on his face, and called out to Dino, asking him to come quickly. Dino, startled by the sudden address, looked back with a confused expression, wondering if Alberto was truly speaking to him. Alberto, with a confident smile, challenged his opponent, asking what was wrong and urging them to come forward. His opponent, Dino, observed Alberto with a serious expression, internally noting that this was not the Dino-san he knew. The two combatants stood in the vast arena, a realization dawning upon them that they were the last two remaining. Alberto engaged in a swift sword fight, deftly dodging a powerful strike. He observed his opponent's incredible agility, realizing this person was clearly different from the Dino he knew. Dino's eyes widened in shock as the intensity of the battle escalated. The two warriors clashed fiercely, their blades meeting with a sharp, resounding impact that echoed through the arena. Dino, now sporting a wide, confident grin, internally scoffed at the notion that he wasn't Dino, asserting his identity with a triumphant air. He continued to smirk, while Alberto, startled by the sudden shift in his opponent's demeanor and power, finally recognized him, exclaiming, "Dino Schwalzer, is that you?" Alberto was forced to one knee, his sword clattering to the ground, as Dino stood victorious and imposing over him. He looked at Dino, who had seemingly reverted to his usual, unassuming self, with a puzzled expression. Dino, in turn, remarked that he hadn't received a proper greeting. Still reeling from the previous display of power, Alberto demanded to know the whereabouts of the true Dino, the one he knew. The powerful Dino merely offered a chilling smirk, his silence a stark contrast to Alberto's desperate plea. He then lunged, striking Alberto with a brutal, swift attack, declaring that Alberto had no need for answers, for he was about to die. Alberto, his expression grim, realized the true nature of this tournament, perceiving it as merely a prelude to something far more sinister. He narrowly evaded another swift attack, the blade whistling past him. Despite Alberto's efforts to defend himself, Dino's assault was relentless, pushing him back with overwhelming force. The relentless pressure forced Alberto to his knees, scraping across the ground. Dino, with a chilling smile, asserted that Alberto could not defeat him, regardless of who he truly was. Dino's smile widened into a terrifying, almost demonic grin, radiating an undeniable killing intent. Alberto, looking up at him, acknowledged the sheer murderous aura, and Dino casually remarked that if he were fighting normally, Alberto might stand a chance. Alberto, drenched in sweat, struggled to comprehend Dino's words, questioning what normally could possibly mean given the current display of power. Overwhelmed and utterly defeated, Alberto collapsed to the ground, his eyes wide and unfocused, unable to stop trembling. Dino stood over him, a silent, menacing victor. From a distance, the mysterious student observed the scene, while the Gross Knight watched from a higher vantage point. As the aftermath of the battle settled, Mira, her expression grave, urgently warned a small, sleeping child to awaken, declaring that to remain asleep would mean death. Beside them, another figure groaned in distress. Meanwhile, the bunny girl host looked on with concern, calling out to Platsama. Alberto, his face contorted in pain and confusion, struggled to comprehend his surroundings, questioning what was happening to him. Alberto, slumped and struggling, heard a mocking voice from above. His opponent, a student with spiky light brown hair, stood over him, smirking as he asked if the poison was finally taking effect. The smirking student then revealed his treachery, explaining that he had laced Alberto's sword with the dragon-sealing poison, impatient that it had taken so long to act. Alberto's eyes widened in shock as he realized the truth, his body already succumbing to the insidious toxin, much to the concern of the onlookers. Meanwhile, the bunny girl host announced Alberto's sudden collapse, expressing concern for his condition. The spiky-haired student, however, angrily dismissed her, reminding her that the tournament rules allowed for up to 3 magic items. Mira, observing the scene, questioned whether poison, especially one that incapacitated an opponent, truly fell within the permissible limits. He merely licked his lips with a sinister smirk, offering no direct answer. Mira, her expression serious, continued to ponder the implications, wondering if poison magic capable of rendering someone unable to fight was truly acceptable. Alberto struggled to push himself up, his body heavy and unresponsive, as his opponent advanced, mocking his weakness. Despite the poison coursing through his veins, Alberto's eyes hardened with a renewed resolve. The spiky-haired student delivered a brutal punch, sending Alberto sprawling to the ground once more. The bunny girl host gasped in horror, covering her mouth, while the mysterious student watched the unfolding violence with an impassive gaze. Alberto, now bruised and bleeding, coughed weakly, a grim realization dawning on him. He understood that only someone like his opponent, with such a cruel and underhanded tactic, would employ such a potent poison. Suddenly, the spiky-haired student's demeanor shifted, his face contorted in rage as he declared himself the younger brother of the werewolf Lord Alberto had slain. He had come, he roared, to avenge his brother's death. Alberto, still on the ground, acknowledged the revelation with a quiet, pained, "Is that so?" His opponent, however, was not satisfied. Enraged, he shouted at Alberto, demanding to know why he was not fighting back, before delivering a harsh kick. The furious student continued his assault, demanding to know how Alberto could apologize when he was completely immobilized. He questioned if Alberto intended to die without a fight. As the blows rained down, Alberto, battered and struggling, had a sudden, profound realization about his attacker. His attacker, consumed by a furious rage, screamed that his brother had been destined to become a demon lord and lead the Demon King's army. He continued his tirade, asserting that his brother had been strong, then, glaring at Alberto, accused him of being a villain, even noting the unsettling similarity in their magical aura. Alberto, still reeling from the poison and the beating, could only stare back in stunned silence. He struggled to comprehend the accusation, his mind racing as he wondered if he truly resembled the one who had caused such pain, a question that echoed in his poisoned thoughts. His assailant, fueled by an unyielding desire for vengeance, lunged forward, a small, sharp blade glinting menacingly in his hand, intent on delivering a fatal blow. He vowed that Alberto would never be forgiven and screamed for him to die. But before the blade could strike its mark, the rival student was suddenly ensnared by shimmering magical chains, his vengeful attack abruptly halted. From the sidelines, the succubus demon observed the scene, remarking with a detached air that excuses were utterly futile. Meanwhile, Alberto lay on the ground, his eyes closed, a faint, ethereal glow surrounding him as he processed an internal realization. Even if I am forgiven, I don't think I can forgive myself. Then, with a sudden, fierce resolve, Alberto's eyes snapped open, a burning determination replacing the pain and confusion. He declared with unwavering conviction that he would not die here, his spirit hardening as he prepared to face his still-bound attacker. Alberto stared in disbelief as a fierce duel unfolded in the arena before him. He recognized one of the combatants, but the other's presence was a complete shock. He confronted the rival student, demanding an explanation. The student merely smirked, revealing a small, dark item from within his jacket, a move that left Alberto utterly stunned, exclaiming that it was impossible. Meanwhile, the bunny girl host expressed her surprise at the use of poison. Mira, observing the situation, clarified that while magic items were generally permitted in the tournament, any item with a direct, immediate effect was strictly forbidden. Alberto, overhearing their conversation, realized the item was indeed a magic artifact. The rival student, now explaining his strategy, revealed a collection of various items. He elaborated that he typically selected items to enhance his magical attack power or resistance, but on this occasion, he had specifically chosen countermeasures against abnormal status effects. He mused that despite the level difference, such preparations were not entirely pointless. He adjusted his scarf with a confident smirk, remarking that it was fortunate the inexpensive item had taken a considerable amount of time to take effect. Among the spectators, Dino explained to Marie and Carol that abnormal status effects posed a significant danger regardless of a combatant's level, making such precautions entirely understandable. Alberto cried out in frustration, realizing the full extent of the rival's cunning. The rival student, however, merely offered a chilling smirk, declaring that the match was already decided. With his declaration, the rival student delivered a devastating punch directly to Alberto's stomach, causing him to gasp and cough up blood. The rival student stood triumphant over Alberto's fallen form. The bunny girl host, her voice echoing through the arena, officially declared him the victor. Among the onlookers, the mysterious student and his companions watched, with the female student one appearing particularly impressed by the display. The succubus demon watched with a look of concern as the victorious rival student carried the unconscious Alberto away. He stated that he had something important he needed to ask him. He carried the unconscious Alberto away from the arena, a sly smirk playing on his lips, his beast-like tail swishing behind him. As he moved, a wave of distress washed over him. His transformation magic, which had given him his beastly form, was beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, the announcer's voice boomed, declaring, "Now, for an interview with the victor, player Platt." Still clutching Alberto, Platt's expression grew more strained as the magic continued to recede. In the distance, the bunny girl host watched, her surprise evident. The crowd in the arena erupted in a cacophony of cheers and shouts, their arms raised in excitement, oblivious to the unfolding magical anomaly. Among the spectators, Dino, now sporting wolf-like ears and a tail, vehemently protested to the succubus. He complained about being called wolf and the unfair accusation that the demon race was cheating, demanding to know why such a commotion had arisen again. He continued his impassioned plea, explaining that he had been trying to evolve into a wolf and that he was tired of being treated unfairly. The succubus listened patiently, a slight smirk on her face. Moments later, Dino found himself in an unfamiliar location, still in his partially transformed state. He looked around, bewildered, and exclaimed, "Where is this?" Platt stood before him in a quiet graveyard, explaining that they were within the royal palace grounds and assuring him there was no immediate danger. With a serious expression, Platt then turned to Dino and asked him to recount everything he knew about Lionetta, leaving Dino with a look of profound surprise. Alberto's eyes widened, a single word forming in his mind: graveyard. He found himself standing before a grave, confronted by a student with fox-like ears and a tail, who demanded to know what had happened to the arena. Alberto calmly urged him to settle down, explaining that there was a specific reason he had brought him to this place. The fox-eared student, still agitated, questioned what that reason could be. The fox-eared student, trembling with fear and anger, grabbed Alberto, demanding to know if he was about to be executed. Alberto, maintaining his composure, reiterated his plea for him to calm down. He offered a reassuring smile, stating that if the fox-eared student still possessed the energy to attack him, then he would surely be alright. Still reeling, the fox-eared student pressed further, demanding to know why Alberto knew the name of that witch and the true reason for his presence in this desolate place. Alberto simply acknowledged his questions. Alberto then gestured towards the grave, inviting the fox-eared student to observe it closely, explaining that this was what he had wanted to show him. The fox-eared student stared at the tombstone, a dawning horror on his face as he realized it was his brother's grave. Alberto confirmed this, explaining that he had buried him, and added that the fox-eared student was free to do as he pleased with the human world, as it no longer concerned him. Overwhelmed, the fox-eared student questioned why his brother had been hanged like a monster, confirming the distinct, unsettling scent emanating from the grave. Alberto explained that the fox-eared student's brother had indeed rampaged through the town, causing harm to its inhabitants, and had been defeated as a result. However, he clarified that attacking the town had not been his brother's true intention. The fox-eared student looked up, surprised, asking if it truly wasn't his brother's intention. Alberto speculated that his brother was likely under a confusion magic spell, and further revealed that the fox-eared student himself had also been subjected to the same magic. He reeled from Alberto's revelation, the words confusion magic echoing in his mind. Could it be that woman? He recalled his brother, a member of the beastkin, who had rampaged through town and was subsequently killed. He had buried him here, a decision he now regretted. He remembered his brother's last words, a plea to be careful, and a past encounter with Alberto and a woman named Lionetta before his brother's departure. That woman, Lionetta, had smiled sweetly in his memory, urging someone to be careful. He then remembered himself and his brother looking utterly bewildered, while Lionetta observed them. It was shortly after that encounter he realized that both he and his brother had begun to act strangely. Snapping back to the present, the fox-eared student turned and began to walk away, his expression grim. Alberto watched him go, a concerned look on his face, as the student asked, "Where are you going?" The fox-eared student declared that he understood Alberto's words, but he would not forgive. Alberto, his gaze steady, then asked if he intended to meet Lionetta. His face contorted with rage, the fox-eared student asserted that above all else, he would target that woman. Only after dealing with her would he turn his attention to others like Platt and Vishuddle. Alberto raised a hand, stopping him. "Wait," he interjected. "I still have more to say." The fox-eared student turned, his expression impatient. "What is it?" he asked. Alberto offered a small smile. "Why don't we join forces?" he proposed. The fox-eared student looked surprised. "Join forces?" he questioned, then added. "And you know Lionetta?" Alberto nodded, his eyes shadowed. "Indeed. She is my nemesis from another world." He pondered the bizarre situation, wondering if it was all a dream. Alberto, with a knowing smile, confirmed that he was indeed well acquainted with Lionetta. Alberto continued, explaining that Lionetta had manipulated him into a fight, a fact he now understood was wrong. He then urgently inquired if the fox-eared student possessed a means to contact someone crucial. The fox-eared student, seemingly lost in thought, did not immediately respond, prompting Alberto to call out to him, asking if he was listening. Platt, with a wide grin, declared his intention to head straight for the biggest death flag he could find, a statement that visibly startled Alberto, who could only utter a confused "what?" He, still energetic, then remembered something important, asking Alberto about Dino's whereabouts and if he had been killed. Platt quickly instructed Alberto to investigate the Academy's first warehouse. Meanwhile, the bunny girl host, cheerful as ever, announced the continuation of the third match, expressing her excitement for Platt's upcoming performance. Lionetta sat nearby, observing the proceedings with a calm demeanor. Lionetta, still seated, wondered aloud where Platt had gone. Mira, standing beside her, explained that both Platt and Gross were temporarily absent due to personal matters, which surprised Lionetta, who hadn't expected Gross to be gone as well. Mira then turned to Lionetta, asking if she would reconsider their engagement should Mira emerge victorious in the Sword Dance Festival. The unexpected question left Lionetta visibly shocked. Lionetta remained seated, lost in thought, her expression pensive. Mira, in a more whimsical form, seemed to be pondering something equally significant. Outside the arena, the sky began to darken ominously, heavy clouds rolling in, signaling a sudden shift in the weather. A chilling presence descended upon the arena, heralded by the title Nightmare Mirage. A mysterious woman with long dark hair and a sinister smile appeared, extending her hand as dark, star-like projectiles rained down upon the unsuspecting crowd, causing widespread panic. Among the spectators, 3 men reacted with alarm. One questioned the sudden, large light, while another wondered why nothing was happening, and a third speculated if it was part of the tournament's show. As chaos erupted, a bald man angrily confronted another observer, accusing him of bumping into him earlier without apologizing. Alberto, caught in the midst of the escalating confusion, looked on with a stunned expression, questioning what was happening. He watched as the arena plunged into pandemonium, spectators erupting in sudden panic. An urgent announcement blared, confirming a riot was underway, likely a magical attack from an unknown source, and warning that the good people were being attacked. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman, the Nightmare Mirage demon, reveled in the chaos, a sinister smile gracing her lips. She declared that a splendid show had begun, noting that she had sensed an incredible amount of magic suddenly emanating from outside. She continued, addressing the bunny girl host and Mira, her voice laced with dark amusement. She questioned if they should gather everyone quickly to revive the Demon King, dismissing the host's surprise about the unexpected turn of events. Her gaze then shifted to Lionetta, the female student, as she mused about the excellent bait the situation provided. She assured them that the tent was protected by a barrier, rendering her safe, and then declared that she would not forgive those who disturbed good people, hinting at her true intentions for the populace. She then revealed her awareness of Lionetta's true identity, acknowledging her as one of the 7 heroes. With a chilling smile, she asserted that her countermeasures were already in place, referring to them as Shadow Hunt. As she spoke, a shadowy figure, a dark assassin, materialized behind Lionetta, swiftly seizing her and covering her mouth to silence her. Lionetta struggled, her eyes wide with shock and fear, unable to cry out as she was bound. A sudden panic gripped the arena as the bunny girl host cried out in alarm, wondering where Lady Sarai had gone. Meanwhile, the announcer official's voice boomed, relaying an urgent message from the king. A powerful magic attack had been launched by an unknown entity, and all students were ordered to stand by. Mira Apprentice listened intently, her expression filled with concern. Elsewhere, the Nightmare Mirage demon smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. She mused that with the troublesome 7 heroes gone, nothing else truly mattered. Back in the arena, the announcer official continued, introducing a demon general from the Demon King's army, who had arrived to put on a show. The bunny girl host shrieked in terror, urging everyone to flee, while King Castral Vishuddle observed the floating, cloaked figure with a calm, regal demeanor. Gross Knight and Carol Fighter also watched the unfolding chaos. The Nightmare Mirage demon then addressed King Castral directly, stating her intention to contribute her meager strength to the Demon King's army, especially during such a grand festival. He listened, his expression unreadable. King Castral's composure finally broke, his face contorted in anger. He demanded to know why a demon general would appear at such a critical moment, and where Alberto, Platt, and the other 7 heroes were. The Nightmare Mirage demon's high-heeled boots stepped onto the arena floor, crushing a small piece of debris. She dismissively declared that she would not allow interference from the Doll Master. As the tension mounted, Carol Fighter stepped forward, a determined glint in her eyes as she drew her sword. She offered to handle the situation for the king, mentioning Princess Asteria. The Nightmare Mirage demon watched her, a hint of amusement on her face. The Nightmare Mirage demon looked down at Carol, her expression dismissive. She found no interest in the fighter, considering her an insignificant presence that would not disrupt her plans. The Nightmare Mirage demon continued to taunt Carol, her smile widening. Carol, however, merely clenched her jaw, her anger simmering beneath the surface. Carol finally unleashed her fury, charging forward with a battle cry. The Nightmare Mirage demon effortlessly evaded her attack, then extended a hand, summoning multiple shadowy blades that materialized around her, mockingly calling Carol a cute little kitten. She extended her arm, a sinister smile gracing her lips, as she conjured a volley of dark, ethereal blades. Shadow Dagger, the Nightmare Mirage demon declared, unleashing her attack. Carol Fighter reacted with a gasp of shock, her eyes wide as the shadowy daggers hurtled towards her. She moved swiftly, attempting to evade the onslaught, but the blades were numerous and precise. The daggers found their mark, tearing through her defenses. She cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground as the force of the blows overwhelmed her. A grim realization dawned on her. The demon's power was immense. Damn it, strong, she thought, struggling against the agony. The Nightmare Mirage demon observed Carol's fall with a detached amusement. Oh my, your father was quite skilled, wasn't he? She mused, a hint of mockery in her tone, as if comparing Carol's current state to a past, more formidable opponent. As she observed, the floating demon general spoke, a dark orb of energy coalescing in his hand. Foolish, to think you could stand against my demonic power, he declared, his voice resonating with overwhelming might, preparing to deliver a final, crushing blow. The powerful attack from the demon general struck Carol Fighter with devastating force, sending shockwaves across the arena. The impact was absolute, leaving no doubt as to the severity of the blow. The devastating impact left Carol Fighter lying motionless on the ground, her body broken. From the stands, the observers watched in horror. Lionetta gasped, such a thing, while the king and the bunny girl host looked on in stunned disbelief. A collective cry of Carol-sama rose from the crowd, their concern palpable. A young woman, Carol, lay prone on the ground, clearly injured, as a voice from the crowd cried out her name in concern. She struggled to rise, her face contorted in pain and disbelief, realizing the vast difference in power between herself and the demon general, a gap she found impossible to comprehend. Meanwhile, a stern-faced commander, observing the chaos, urgently ordered his subordinates to evacuate the civilians and summon Platt and Albert for immediate aid to the injured, acknowledging that many were likely suffering from broken bones and unable to move. His attention was then drawn to a messenger who reported the dire news. The entire royal capital was engulfed in pandemonium, and there were no safe evacuation points remaining. From her vantage point, the demon general smirked, confirming that the chaos was not confined to the arena alone, but encompassed the entirety of the royal capital. The commander's eyes widened in horror, unable to believe the sheer scale of the magic he was witnessing, a phenomenon unlike anything he had ever encountered. Elsewhere, Carol was being hastily carried away on a stretcher by two attendants, still groaning in pain and struggling to maintain consciousness. The demon general, however, remained unperturbed, dismissing the widespread chaos as mere illusion magic. She calmly instructed her forces to maintain their positions and wait for the effects of the spell to dissipate. She then turned her gaze towards the commander, a subtle, knowing smile playing on her lips as she questioned if he truly believed this was the full extent of her plans. The commander, bewildered, asked what she meant, to which she replied that for such a grand festival, this alone would hardly be enough. She declared that the demon army's main force had been waiting near the royal capital, in the Muron forest, and that it was no big deal. Soon, they would all come pouring into the capital. The commander, hearing this, reacted with shock, exclaiming about the Muron forest being so close. His subordinate urgently reported that all the soldiers had been dispatched to the city. She let out a triumphant laugh, pondering if this nation, with its 7 heroes absent and the capital in such great chaos, truly possessed the strength to oppose her and the demon army. Meanwhile, the commander stood on a balcony, clenching his fist in frustration, muttering a curse. Not far away, a young noblewoman, Marie, looked out at the chaotic city. She worried that the kingdom was in a dire state, and that even their current location was too dangerous. The panicked cries of the common folk below echoed her fears, calling out her name in desperation. Just then, a portly nobleman approached Marie, holding a glass of wine, his expression unsettling. He asked if she had been there all along, startling her. Marie gasped in surprise, realizing that even the nobles in the VIP seats were using magic. The man chuckled, remarking how truly beautiful she was up close, and then roughly grabbed her arm, causing her to cry out. The commander, observing from a distance, thought to himself that he had wanted to do terrible things to her the moment he first saw her that night, and that he was glad she was still alive. Marie, however, realized his intentions were shallow. The nobleman, still holding Marie, explained that while a defensive barrier was indeed cast over the VIP seats, if anyone from outside the barrier were to enter, it would be the end. Marie looked away, a grim realization dawning on her. Those who had not been affected by the magic were now rapidly becoming infected. She struggled against the nobleman's grip, her face contorted in distress as he forced her close. He demanded a kiss, silencing her protests with a hand over her mouth, ignoring her muffled pleas for him to stop. With a surge of defiance, she pulled away, her eyes blazing. Marie declared herself the fiancée of Brat von Bichtel, asserting that she would never become his property. The nobleman's lecherous grin faltered, replaced by a look of utter surprise at her declaration. Just then, a swift, dark shape moved into view from the side. A powerful blow connected with the nobleman's face, sending him sprawling backward with a sickening crunch. Blood splattered as he was violently struck down. Marie, still on the floor, looked up in shock as a young man stood over the incapacitated nobleman. He reassured her, stating that she was safe now. The young man, Brat, turned to Marie with a relieved smile, apologizing for his delay and asking if she was unharmed. Marie, her eyes wide with relief, could only manage a small, grateful sound. He extended a hand to her, offering assistance as she remained on the floor, still processing the sudden turn of events. Marie, now held securely in Blat's arms, buried her face in his chest, tears finally streaming down her face as she confessed how truly frightened she had been. Blat held her close, his expression grim. He acknowledged the profound danger they had faced, realizing that if his preparations had been delayed even a moment longer, the outcome could have been far worse. His hand, clenched into a fist, trembled slightly. Blat gently patted Marie's head, reassuring her that everything would be all right and that she should leave the rest to him. Marie looked up at him, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. She reacted with a surprised, almost flustered expression as he continued to gently pat her head. Moments later, Marie, now composed, bowed deeply to Blat, expressing her gratitude for his assistance and declaring that she was fine and would leave the rest to everyone. He stood nearby, observing her with a neutral expression. He simply acknowledged her statement, confirming that he understood. Marie, still appearing somewhat shy, turned her head away. Suddenly, Blat perched himself on a nearby railing, playfully suggesting that if she were to give him a kiss on the cheek, he might find renewed motivation. Marie, blushing intensely, exclaimed in exasperation, demanding to know what he was doing at such a critical moment. He continued, a wide, confident smile on his face, explaining to Marie that breaking off an engagement was a serious matter and that the continuation of the tournament seemed difficult. He suggested they reconsider another opportunity. Marie looked at him, a slight smile playing on her lips, realizing he was acting selfishly once more. Meanwhile, the commander, looking deeply concerned, questioned if the voice he heard belonged to Blat. He then offered an apology to him. Blat was seen crouching, his gaze fixed downwards. He looked up, a wide, confident smile spreading across his face, assuring the commander that it was nothing and to leave the rest to him. The commander, visibly relieved, watched as Blat gracefully leaped from the railing, descending into the arena below. From atop a high wall, the demon general looked down upon Blat, who now stood in the arena. She remarked that Blat von Bichtel was late. He met her gaze with a determined expression. He faced the demon general, who remarked that the show had already begun without him, as he was too late. Blat, however, smiled, stating it was an honor if she had waited for him even a little, addressing her as the marionette princess. As he stood in the arena, the commander, observing from above, spoke of a light-mouthed general and the capital's descent into chaos. Marie, meanwhile, looked on with a heavy heart. Blat, reflecting on his own nature, admitted he liked helping people, prompting the commander to question what he intended to do. He considered the commander's question, a thought forming in his mind. It's impossible for me. With a quiet affirmation, that's right. He turned and began to walk away from the confrontation. His unexpected retreat left Marie, the noble man, and Carol utterly stunned, their faces contorted in disbelief. Amidst the widespread shock, the demon general let out a chilling laugh, declaring that with the Holy Mother sealed, nothing could save their world. She asserted that her opponents now understood this truth, adding that she had no time to waste, and urged them to finish the confrontation swiftly. Carol watched, her expression filled with sorrow, as Blat pondered the demon general's words, a question echoing in his mind. There are things that can't be saved, right? The demon general, meanwhile, maintained a stern gaze, awaiting a response. He then voiced his conclusion, stating that he could do nothing about the current situation, that he simply could not save it. The demon general remained a dark, imposing presence in the background. As the commander watched and Marie prayed fervently, Blat suddenly broke into a wide smile, declaring with conviction, "The one who saves is, it's not me." His words struck the demon general with visible shock. In that instant, a radiant light enveloped Marie, who stood in the center of the arena, as if undergoing an area clarification, her form glowing with an ethereal power. The demon general stared, her eyes wide with utter disbelief, letting out a sharp gasp as she witnessed Marie's sudden transformation. As her transformation completed, a wave of confusion swept through the arena. Blat looked on, a subtle question in his eyes, while nearby, a commoner reacted with a frustrated shout, raising his fist in bewilderment. The disorientation spread rapidly through the assembled crowd. People murmured, questioning what they had done, where they were, and some even expressed a sudden, inexplicable urge to apologize to their loved ones, as if a crucial memory had been erased. Amidst the chaos, the demon general stared in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the unfolding events. Marie, however, stood radiant and composed, a gentle smile gracing her lips as she confidently declared that healing was an easy task for her, for she was, after all, a goddess. A young woman with bunny ears looked on in wide-eyed shock, questioning what was happening. Nearby, another bunny-eared woman stood with her back turned, seemingly distressed by the unfolding events. As the chaos continued, Marie appeared, greeting the demon general with a knowing smile and asking why she was present. The demon general, however, glared back with intense fury, recognizing Marie as the Holy Mother of Salvation. The demon general's fury intensified as she vehemently declared that she had sealed the entity in another dimension just moments ago. Yet, Before her eyes, the shadowy figure now stood, letting out a low, mocking laugh. The shadowy entity continued its taunts, openly mocking the demon general as a fool who had been thoroughly deceived. The demon general recoiled, her face contorted in disbelief and shock. The entity then revealed the depth of its deception, explaining that it had forged a contract with the great darkness itself and opened a corridor, a feat it claimed only a true demon lord could accomplish. The demon general listened, her eyes wide with horror at the implications. As it spoke, the shadowy entity began to shift and writhe, its form becoming more defined and menacing, as if gathering immense power. Suddenly, a new figure, the werewolf lord, appeared, confidently declaring his presence and mocking the demon general for being discarded like a worn-out rag. He was not alone. Brat and Marie stood beside him, both smiling, confirming their alliance. The demon general, utterly stunned, demanded to know why he was there. Brat, looking somewhat exasperated, silenced the shadowy entity, now identified as Lionetta, and admitted that while he had only half believed the prince's words, they had proven correct. He then revealed that Lionetta's true face had been exposed. The demon general stared in disbelief, realizing her entire plan had been anticipated. Brat confirmed her fears, explaining that he had received crucial information from an unnamed source, allowing him to foresee her machinations. Marie then stepped forward, clarifying their strategy. To protect Serene, the only known counter to the demon general's powerful illusion magic, they needed Lionetta to become a shadow warrior. Lionetta, now a kneeling, shadowy figure, seemed to accept this new role. He reflected on the situation, acknowledging that Lionetta had planned for the final quest and the national upheaval. He mused that it was fortunate they knew of a countermeasure, and that his transformation ability was proving quite useful. His foresight impressed those around him. Marie, with a gentle smile, praised him, remarking on how far ahead he had managed to read the situation. Even the noble man expressed astonishment, while Bunny Girl 1, with wide, adoring eyes, declared him amazing. Meanwhile, the demon general, though seemingly outmaneuvered, maintained a sinister smile. She conceded that her plans had indeed been read, but dismissed it as a minor issue. She revealed that the monsters were likely already waiting in the forest, having lured the capital's citizens there. As the werewolf lord and Brat observed, the demon general continued to explain her true objective, to gather the negative emotions of the people and revive the demon king. She then turned to Marie, asking if she truly wished for this outcome. She further elaborated that the forest monsters would be no match for the capital's defenses, and that the magic stones from the capital would soon gather at her location. With a triumphant grin, the demon general extended her hand, revealing a small, glowing cage containing a creature. The caged creature remained still, its form indistinct within the bars. Suddenly, the demon general's eyes widened in shock and confusion, a single syllable of disbelief escaping her lips. A sharp, impactful sound echoed, indicating a sudden, forceful event. Meanwhile, in the forest, the werewolf lord stretched languidly, commenting on the surprisingly large number of small monsters gathered before him. He yawned, finding the situation rather tiresome. He then unleashed a burst of fire magic, incinerating several of the creatures with a roar. A small, elf-like figure, wearing a witch's hat, observed the scene, remarking on the demon general's unexpected ambush and the sheer number of foes. She expressed annoyance at having to deal with so many, calling them idiots. As she stood, her hands slightly outstretched, the werewolf lord turned to her, his large sword resting casually in his grip. He questioned her, asking about Grisette and what the prince truly was. She, in turn, pondered internally, wondering if he was truly a child of man. The monstrous creatures roared, their forms contorting with primal fury as they lunged forward. His gaze sharpened, a flicker of resolve igniting within his dark eyes. With a decisive motion, he gripped the hilt of his massive sword, preparing for battle. He stood firm, a confident smirk playing on his lips, as a powerful, absolute territory manifested around him, ready to unleash its might. Moments later, a devastating, sweeping attack erupted from him, tearing through the monstrous forms and sending them scattering amidst a shower of debris. He knelt, the effort evident in his posture. After the battle, he found himself in a tranquil forest, where the elf witch stood, observing him with an unreadable expression. She held her sword, remarking that even a single person like him could handle the situation with ease, questioning if he was truly Brat. He responded with a sly smile, admitting that he himself wasn't entirely sure of the answer. A soft breeze rustled through the distant trees, carrying a faint, questioning sound. The conversation concluded, leaving an empty, silent arena in its wake. Brat, with a serious expression, urged the unseen Lionetta to surrender. She, the shadow entity, held a small, empty cage, declaring that her plan had utterly failed, for the magic stone no longer contained any human power. As the shadow entity glared, calling him by his full name, Brat von Bichtel, he pressed her, demanding to know her true identity. He looked away, his gaze falling, a pensive expression settling upon his face. Moments later, within a vast, circular arena, he stood alone, looking up at the shadow entity perched high on a distant wall, and began to speak. He offered a small smile, explaining that he merely wished to avoid a death flag, and was nothing more than the prince of a certain country. Her eyes widened, a furious disbelief contorting her features as she processed his words. With a furious cry of shadow dagger, she launched a volley of dark blades at him, but he effortlessly evaded each one. She then angrily demanded he stop joking, insisting there was no time for such frivolity. He, however, calmly asked her to listen first, warning that she would regret it if she didn't finish him now. She lunged forward, her clawed hand aiming for his face, but he swiftly blocked the attack with his arm, deflecting her strike. The two engaged in a blur of rapid combat, their forms streaking across the arena as they exchanged blows. He continued to evade her furious assaults, prompting the shadow entity to snarl in frustration, demanding to know why her attacks failed to connect. He attempted to reason with her, urging her to listen, asserting that he could save her sister. As he moved with incredible speed, Brat recalled every pattern of the fake queen's actions, allowing him to evade her completely. He closed the distance, knife in hand, reiterating his plea for her to listen, insisting that he could save her sister. The shadow entity, caught off guard by his proximity and words, could only utter a sound of profound shock. Brat, with a confident smile, assured the noble man that he was fine and asked if he could leave the matter to him. The noble man, taken aback, questioned Blat's readiness. Moments later, Brat stood before the demon general, who stared at him with a mixture of shock and confusion, demanding to know why he had interfered with her sister. Her expression hardened, a silent resolve settling upon her features. Meanwhile, on a rain-swept street, the noble man confronted the demon general, who stood outside a grand building. He questioned her identity, informing her that she was mistaken about her destination and that an important meeting was in progress. He continued, feigning concern for her well-being in the cold rain, and advised her to return home swiftly. She offered a faint, unsettling smile in response. Her smile widened slightly as she calmly stated that the rain was precisely why she was there. The nobleman's composure shattered, his eyes widening in disbelief as he stammered, questioning what she had just said. Without warning, she seized him by the collar, pulling him close. She offered a chilling apology, revealing that she was acting under the direct command of the king's reincarnation and the leaders of the Holy Rima Kingdom, declaring herself an agent of the nation of Rima. The nobleman's face contorted in terror. She turned and walked away, leaving the nobleman's lifeless form sprawled on the blood-splattered floor. The Blunel family, his lineage, had served the Holy Rima Kingdom for generations as assassins, but then, one day, everything changed. Later, dressed in simpler attire, she opened a door, announcing her return home to her father and mother. Behind the partially open door, a single foot lay motionless, a grim testament to her actions. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with unspeakable horror, as the bodies of her parents lay brutally murdered on the ornate rug. A soldier, his sword still drawn, loomed over the carnage, a silent testament to the atrocity. As the soldier addressed her, her father, gravely wounded but still clinging to life, desperately urged her to flee with Marie. His voice, weak and strained, was a final plea for their survival amidst the unfolding massacre. Meanwhile, a young girl, her long hair flowing, stood equally stunned, dropping her basket of freshly picked flowers as the grim reality of the situation dawned upon her. Far from the scene of the massacre, a grizzled commander, his face stern, confirmed the identity of the fleeing girl as Arietta, Marie's sister, and ordered the pursuit to commence immediately. The young Arietta, her face a mask of anguish and terror, fled through the halls, the horrific images of her parents' murder seared into her mind. As she fled, her younger sister Marie called out to her, urging her to wait. It was then revealed that the Blunel family, their lineage, was known as tailcutters, a designation that hinted at their grim role. The commander continued his explanation, detailing how the dark assassination business, once known to the world, brought condemnation upon the Rima royal family for harboring such assassins. As a result, the kingdom faced immense pressure. Ultimately, the kingdom succumbed to that public outcry and made the devastating decision to exterminate the entire Blunel family. Despite the ongoing pursuit, Arietta believed she had finally found a safe haven, a small, secluded house by the sea, far from the reach of her pursuers. However, her respite was fleeting. As she opened the door, a voice from within greeted her warmly, calling her big sister, a moment of unexpected normalcy amidst the chaos of her escape. She listened as her younger sister, Marie, cheerfully recounted her day, mentioning that the scary people hadn't come and that Arietta had made her favorite mushroom soup. Arietta, with a gentle smile, confirmed her sister's words. Marie, still beaming, eagerly urged her to eat quickly. Yet, a close-up of Arietta's eye revealed a deeper, more troubled gaze, hinting at a burden she carried beneath her calm exterior. Soon after finding a safe haven on a secluded peninsula, a grave misfortune befell them. Arietta knelt beside Marie, who now lay still in bed, afflicted by a powerful curse of the dark spirits. The curse was one of eternal slumber, trapping Marie in a profound darkness from which she would never awaken. The demon general sat in quiet contemplation, her gaze distant as she pondered the relentless march of fate and how far it would carry her. She recalled a desperate time when she had tried every means to awaken Arietta, but her sister's eyes would not open. It was then that Beelzebub appeared before her, offering to help save her sister if she cooperated with the Demon King's awakening. Thus, she had joined the Demon King's army. Brat, however, questioned her, stating he did not understand why she knew about his sister, and confessed that he was tired of trusting people. He pressed her further, asking if she had truly trusted and cooperated with the Demon King's army and Beelzebub, despite her evident suspicions. She explained that Beelzebub had bound her with a sword oath, a powerful contract magic that risked her life if broken. He then understood that she had put her life on the line. With a resolute expression, he declared that he would make that same oath with her. She gasped in surprise, questioning why he would do such a thing for her sister, who was not even his kin. Meanwhile, the werewolf lord, observing from a distance, exclaimed in shock, demanding to know what Blat was thinking. From a balcony, Marie strained to hear the distant conversation, catching only a faint, unsettling word: death. Blat offered a deal, proposing that he would save her sister, and in return, she would withdraw from the kingdom. He asked if it was not a bad arrangement for both of them. The demon general looked at him, her expression unreadable as she considered his audacious proposal. Her gaze, sharp and calculating, met his. His own eyes, equally resolute, held hers without wavering, a silent challenge passing between them. After a moment of intense consideration, she finally conceded, stating that the contract would be made, as it would not be inconvenient for her. He, in turn, seemed to question her reasoning, asking if she truly believed it would not be inconvenient. He responded with a wide, almost childlike smile, expressing his gratitude. Meanwhile, a tiny, doll-like figure, a manifestation of her sister Arietta, looked on with a hint of annoyance. The demon general, flustered by his unexpected reaction, stammered, urging him to begin the ritual quickly. The small Arietta figure mirrored her exasperation. Moments later, a complex magic circle began to glow beneath her feet, its intricate runes swirling with arcane energy, signaling the commencement of the sword oath. She raised her hands, gathering shimmering magical energy, which then coalesced into a tangible form. As the ritual progressed, Blat watched, acknowledging the formidable power of the ancient contract magic she wielded. With a fierce determination in her eyes, she channeled the energy, manifesting a spectral sword, its blade humming with raw magical power. As the sword solidified, Blat extended his hand, and she reached out, their fingers brushing as they prepared to seal the pact. From a nearby doorway, Bunny Girl 1 observed the unfolding ritual with wide eyes. A single drop of blood fell from her fingertip onto the spectral blade, shimmering as it made contact. She then brought her finger to her lips, tasting the essence of the oath. She turned her gaze back to Blat, the spectral sword now held firmly in her grasp, and asked if he would swear upon this blade to break her sister's curse. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable, as the small Arietta figure watched intently. She extended her hand towards him, the spectral blade hovering between them, and urged him to swear the oath. Blat, looking back at her, seemed to accept the challenge. He confirmed his readiness, asking if she was truly prepared for the gravity of the pact. She affirmed, instructing him to relax his power as the ritual was about to be sealed. The scene in the arena erupted in a blinding, ethereal light, signifying the powerful magic at play. The demon general and Blat stood opposite each other, enveloped in the radiant energy. As the sword oath ritual reached its climax, she declared the contract complete, her voice resonating with finality. Blat, with a serene expression, closed his eyes, having fully committed to the terms of the formidable oath.